So should we start from these three states?
Yes, yes. Deep sleep. That's a very good place to start.
Okay, you're welcome, Marcus. Go ahead.
Okay, namaskaram.
Namaskaram.
The first question I've been asked to talk about is about the three states of waking, dream, and deep sleep. Why do we consider this waking state to be real? This is a common question, and not many can accept that the waking state is also another dream. Clarification on this would be nice. Yes, this is a very, very important topic. To understand why we consider this waking state to be real, it would be useful to consider why dream seems to be real so long as we are dreaming. Once we wake up from a dream, we then say, oh, it was just a dream. And we are able to recognize that it was just our own mental fabrication. But all the things we saw and heard and everything that we experienced in the dream was just our own mental fabrication. There was the world we were seeing was not existing outside. So if we understand why dream seems to be real, so long as we're dreaming, but ceases to seem real when we cease to dream, that particular dream, that will throw a lot of light on why our present state seems to be real. What is actually real is only ourself. We ourselves are the only thing that is real. But when we are dreaming, we experience ourselves as a body in that dream world. Because we experience ourselves as a body and we are seeing the dream world through the five senses of that body, since that body in our experience seems to be ourself, and since we are real, the body seems to be real. That is, the one thing we can never doubt or deny the reality of is ourself. Everything that we experience could be just an illusion, but we ourselves must be real. There must be, if we didn't exist, we couldn't be aware of anything. So the fact that we are aware means that we do exist. So our awareness is the proof of our existence. So, there's one point I will clarify here. That is, when Bhagavan talks about real and unreal, there's a very simple definition of what is real. What is real, to be real means to actually exist. So what actually exists is real. What doesn't actually exist, but merely seems to exist, is unreal. So that is the sense in which we're using the word real here. So when I say we alone are real, we are the only thing that actually exists. That is according to Bhagavan. And according to our experience, though other things seem to exist, we can doubt whether any of those things actually exist, because they seem to exist where? They seem to exist in our perception. So that the fact that we see something is not a proof that it exists, because we see so many things that don't exist. In dream, we see a whole world that doesn't actually exist. It exists only in our perception, only in our awareness. So, but the one thing, as I say, the one thing that whose existence we cannot doubt is our own existence, because the very fact that we are aware means that we must exist. We couldn't be aware if we didn't exist. So our own existence is real. Everything else, the reality of it is in question. But so long as we experience ourselves as a body, because we experience that body as ourselves, and because we ourselves are real, that body seems to us to be real. And the body is a part of the world. So if the body cannot be real unless the whole world is real. So the fact that we take this body as ourselves makes the body appear to be real, seem to be real. And consequently, the whole world seems to be real. So when we are dreaming, we are experiencing ourselves as a body in that dream world. So that body seems to be real, and hence the whole dream world seems to be real. But as soon as we wake up from dream. That means as soon as we leave that dream and come to this state, our identification with that dream body is cut. We no longer experience that dream body to be ourselves. So it no longer seems to be real. This is why as soon as we wake up from a dream, we're immediately able to recognize, oh, it was just a dream. It wasn't real. It was just in my own mind. But so long as we were dreaming, it seemed very real. Sometimes in dream, for example, we experience things and we may think, oh, this is not possible. I can't. For example, in dream, we may be flying. And we think to ourselves, no, this can't be real because this must be just a dream because I can't really fly. But it seems so real. Then we think to ourselves, oh, maybe I can fly, but I just wasn't aware of it before because it's so easy to fly. And then we think, oh, I hope I don't forget how to fly. Now I'm able to fly. I shouldn't forget this. So but however improbable the situation is in dream, and however much the thought may occur to us, oh, this is just a dream, but the experience is so real that the reality, the seeming reality of the experience overrides all our reasoning that this can't be real. Another example, sometimes in dream, we meet friends or relatives who have passed away many years before. And we may be surprised. Oh, my father passed away so long before, and here he is, he's talking to me. But to us, it seems so real, but that person is there and talking to us. We take this to be more real than that memory, but the person who passed away. So maybe it was wrong information. Maybe they hadn't passed away, or somehow they'd come back to life somehow. But the situation we find ourselves in seems to be so real that it overrides all our reasoning and our memories and to the contrary. In exactly the same way as the dream appears to be real, so long as we're dreaming, because we experience ourselves as a dream body, so the dream body seems to be real, and hence the whole world seems to be real. And hence even the dead people who've come back to life and we're talking to seem so real. Everything seems real. Our flying seems to be real. Everything seems to be so real while you're actually experiencing it. But though we may think to ourselves in a dream, oh, this is just a dream, that mere thought that it's a dream doesn't override the clear experience. Oh, this is real. The experience of what is far stronger than any reasoning we may have about it. But however real we take it to be, as soon as we wake up, our identification with the dream body is severed. And immediately we recognize without a doubt, oh, it was all just a dream. None of it was real. So we supposing in a dream, a very dear friend has passed away. We may be grieving in the dream. As soon as we wake up, our grief vanishes because we reckon, oh, it was only a dream. It wasn't true. Our friend hasn't really died. So like that, it seems so real because of our identification with that body in dream. In exactly the same way, so long as we are in this present state, which according to Bhagavan is just another dream, this seems to be real because now I experience myself as this body. So this body seems to me, I can't doubt the reality of this body because if this body is me, I'm certainly real, so this body must be real. And if this body is real, then this chair I'm sitting on and the table and the computer and the people on the who are in different parts of the world who are having this joining in this conversation now, all seem to be so real, so long as we identify ourselves with the body. So this is why the waking state seems to us to be so real, and why it seems difficult for us to accept that this is just a dream. But if we consider carefully, though this seems to be so real now, do we have any evidence that this is anything other than a dream? If we think about it, there is actually no evidence that this is anything other than a dream, because whatever we experience now, we could equally well experience in dream. People say, no, but we have science. Science tells us that the world is this earth is so many billions of years old. The universe, since the Big Bang, so many billions of years have passed. There are precise measurements, and there's so much corroborating evidence, so on and so forth. And there's the history books that tell us what happened before we were born. So obviously this world exists independent of our perception of it. All these things we can experience in dream. In dream, you can go to you can attend a lecture or a TED talk about physics, about what they call it, astrophysics or cosmology, the theories about the origin of the cosmos according to modern physics. You can attend a TED talk in your dream. You can get lots of information about all these things. So long as you're dreaming, it all seems so real. So there's no any evidence we try to point out to say that this world is real, exists independent of ourselves. We can point out exactly the same evidence can be shown in dream, but that doesn't mean the dream is real. For example, if this world is this present state is just a dream, that means when we don't see this, it doesn't exist. So that means when we're dreaming, when we're asleep, when we're in deep dreamless sleep, we're not aware of the body, we're not aware of the world, either this body or any dream body, either this world or any dream world. We're not aware of any body or any world at all. But we assume this world exists even when we're not perceiving it. And if someone questions us, we'll say, no, I may not have been perceiving the world, but when I come back to waking state and I ask others, they will tell me, yes, the world existed. We saw your body lying on the bed while you were sleeping. There were so many things happening in the morning. We can pick up a newspaper or open and turn on the television. We can see the news and we can find out that there was such and such a thing happened in the middle of last night. All this seems to us to be evidence that the world existed when we were asleep. But if you ask anyone in a dream, did this world exist when I was asleep? They will give you exactly the same assurance that people in this state will give. If you turn on the news, the television, or look in your PC or open a newspaper in a dream, it will give you the same evidence that you can get now. So if we consider it critically, there is nothing about our present state that is evidence, that is adequate evidence, that is true evidence, but this is anything but a dream. If whatever evidence we may try and point out, we should consider to ourselves, could we experience that in dream? Obviously we could. We can experience anything in dream. So there's no evidence that this is anything other than a dream. So in the absence of any evidence, should we believe something? Obviously not. Then people say, oh, but if you believe that this is a dream, why shouldn't I believe that it's not a dream? Isn't that equally reasonable? No, it is not. Because if you say this is a dream, you are saying there's no world existing outside the mind. There's no world that exists independent of your perception of it. So by saying this is a dream, you are not making any claims that are not reasonable. Yes, the world may not exist, but I see it. Exactly the same in dream. The world we see in a dream doesn't exist, but we see it. So all we can say about this world is that it seems to exist. We cannot say that it actually exists. But if we say this is not a dream, this is some state superior to a dream, this is more real than a dream, because this world exists even when I don't see it, we are then making a claim for which we have no evidence. There is no more evidence that this world exists when we don't see it than that the dream world exists when we don't see it. As soon as we wake up from a dream, we recognize, oh, it was just a dream. That world had no existence independent of my perception of it. We don't, if we met a friend in our dream last night, we don't go meet the friend and say, oh, that was a very nice conversation we had in my dream. Did you enjoy that conversation? No, we know, but the friend we saw in our dream, it was just in our own mind that we were having that conversation with the friend. That friend wouldn't have experienced what we experienced. So when we think of it critically, there's no evidence that this is anything but a dream. And if we claim this is something more than a dream, we are claiming that things exist for which we have no evidence. If we say this world exists independent of our perception of it, where is the evidence? The only evidence we have that this world exists is our perception of it. But our perception of it doesn't prove that it exists. All our perception proves is that to us it seems to exist. And the important thing there, when we talk about, in Advaita, they say the world is just an appearance. But but what Bhagavan has taught us is the Advaita in its purest form. But Bhagavan has pointed out certain subtle things, have made certain things clear, but make the whole thing more clear and more simple. For example, this whole world is an appearance. It's said in Advaita. This is called Vivartabhada. Vivata means it's an illusory appearance. So one of the basic tenets of Advaita philosophy is that everything other than ourselves, the world and everything that we perceive, is just an appearance. But Bhagavan asked the all-important question, to whom does it appear? Because there cannot be an appearance without it appearing to someone. Something is called an appearance because it appears to something. Something is said to seem to exist because it seems to exist in the view of something. So all we can say about this world is it seems to exist. And to whom does it seem to exist? It seems to exist to me. So the seeming existence of the world depends on my perception of it. And we have absolutely no evidence that any world exists or anything exists independent of our perception of it. So what Bhagavan teaches us is very reasonable, but he's teaching this not just as a philosophy. There are so many philosophers in the world. There are what are called realist philosophies, but take the world to be real. And there are what are called idealist philosophies, but say it's all in the mind. And there are so many variations of all these. But we are not here just for the sake of philosophy, because, as I say, the important thing is, ultimately, whether this world exists or not, what is important, to whom does it, even if the world doesn't actually exist, at least it seems to exist. But to whom does it seem to exist? That is the important point. That is what Advaita is pointing at. All of Advaita teachings, if we understand them correctly, they're all pointing back to ourselves. For example, it is said in the Upanishads, there is one only without a second. Ekam eva advitiyam. Ekam means one, eva means only, advitiyam means without a second. So that is one of the basic principles of Advaita. There is only one thing, and there's no second thing. So what is that one thing? Advaita says, Tattvamasi, you are that. So what do we have to understand from this? The whole aim of the Upanishads, if we understand them deeply, the whole aim of the Upanishads is to turn, and the whole of Vedanta is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. This is what Bhagavan has emphasized. Because so many people talk Vedanta philosophy. They debate about Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, Dvaita, Veda, Chintya, so many different, innumerable different interpretations of Vedanta. Vedanta means basically the philosophy of the Upanishads, which were summarized in the Brahma Sutra, and which were also expressed in the Bhagavad Gita. These three sets of texts, the Upanishads, the the Brahma Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita. These are the Prasthanatraya, the three foundational texts of Advaita. These texts are meant to suit different people at different stages of spiritual development. So they can be and have been interpreted in many different ways. One of those ways is Advaita. That is the Bhagavan obviously was clearly an Advaitin, but even the vast majority of Advaitins, they don't understand the practical import of Vedanta. They know the philosophy. They've read the Upanishads, they've read the Brahma Sutra, the Bhagavad Gita, they've read commentaries on them, they studied so many other associated texts. They can give lectures for hours on end about Advaita philosophy. But the one thing they miss is what is the practical implication. For example, they say, the study of Vedanta entails Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Sravana literally means hearing, but it includes reading, studying. So learning the Advaita, learning the basic philosophy, that is Sravana. Manana means thinking about it deeply, making sense of it all. Merely reading something doesn't mean you've understood it. You need to think about it. You need to understand, why is it said like this here? Why is it said like that there? How these are reconciled? What is the correct interpretation of this? What is the implication? This is manana. And the third and most important of all is nididhyasana. Nididhyasana, the word nididhyasana simply means deep contemplation. If you listen to lectures on Vedanta, they will talk about Sravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. But if you ask what is Nididhyasana, that is the one place where you cannot get, it's very rare to get a clear answer. The logical thing is, since Vedanta is all about Brahman, the deep contemplation should be on what? It should be on Brahman. So who is Brahman? You are that. So how do I contemplate on Brahman? I have to contemplate on myself. There's no Brahman. If we take the plain, straightforward meaning of Tattvamasi, you are that, or that is that you are, the correct order. The straightforward meaning is that the straightforward implication is but there's no such thing as Brahman other than you. So if you want to meditate on Brahman, on what do you have to meditate? You have to meditate on you. This point is missed. So the people will give lectures for hours and write voluminous books and commentaries and sub-commentaries, and they'll discuss different interpretations and everything, but they're missing the point. The point is, Vedanta is a philosophy, but it's a philosophy with a purpose, with a practical purpose. It's not just for the sake of philosophizing. We can study all of Vedanta, but how is it going to help us when death comes? We're going to die anyway. It's not merely having the idea, I am not this body, I am Brahman. That doesn't solve our problems. We've all heard, yes, we are not this body, we are Brahman, we are infinite, we are Anadi, Ananta, Kanda, Satchidananda, we are Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, we are infinite. Is that our experience? No. Our experience is, no, I'm this little body, I'm this finite body. So the ignorance lies in our identification with this body. Because when we experience ourselves as I am this body, we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So how can we get rid of this? They say that the problem is avidya, ignorance. And ignorance can be removed only by vidya. But many of these Advaitins, they think vidya can be gained only from the textbook, only from the text. It's only from the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita. Only from there you can get vidya, but all you can get from books is information. You cannot get the actual experience of being of being infinite. That's why Bhagavan says in the 16th paragraph of Nana, all the books say that for attaining mukti, it's necessary to subdue or to make the mind cease. When this truth is known, what is the use of reading without limit? Going on and on reading more and more books, thinking that you're going to get Brahmanyana by reading books is foolishness. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said this in a very simple, homely way. He said the Panchangam. Panchangam means the astrological almanac. But Panchangam may tell you when it is going to rain, but no matter how hard you squeeze the pages of a Panchangam, you'll not be able to get even a drop of water from them. That is a way of saying these books are useful. They point out something useful, but you cannot get that from the books itself. What the Upanishads tell us is you are that. So what should we understand from that? Oh, if I am that, then I need to know myself. How can I know myself? Not by going back to the books. I can't know myself from books. I need to investigate myself. That's why Bhagavan says in that 16th paragraph, does a person called Raman need a mirror to know he is Raman? Do we need the books to know what we are? The books can give us information. They can point us in the right direction, but the books cannot reveal to us what we actually are, because what we actually are is not just a piece of information. Okay, now I know I am Brahman, we can say. When we say, I know I am Brahman, that means I have read the books, I now have that piece of information. But information is not real knowledge. Information is not Vidya. The Vidya that is talked about is actual experiential knowledge. We need to experience ourselves as Brahman. And how can we experience ourselves as Brahman? So long as we are experiencing anything other than ourselves, we who are experiencing that are ego, the false awareness that is aware of itself as I am this body. So we cannot know ourselves as Brahman without, Brahman is pure awareness. Prajnanam Brahman, it is said. That implies Brahman is just pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. So long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves, we cannot know what we actually are. We need to withdraw our attention from all other things by focusing it on ourself alone. It's only by turning our entire attention back towards ourselves but we can know ourselves as we actually are. If you want to see something, you cannot see it by reading books about it. If you want to see something, you need to look at it. There's no other means to see something than to look at it. There's no other means to know ourselves than to look at ourselves. Look at ourselves means not with our eyes. Obviously, we're not talking about looking at a physical object. We're not talking about looking at an object at all. We need to withdraw our attention from all objects and focus it on ourselves, the subject, the one to whom all these objects appear. So in a sense, I've covered now the first two questions because the other one was Bhagavan's main teaching simplified. I can say a bit more on this. Have I covered the point about waking, dream, and sleep? I'll just say one more thing. I talked about waking and dream and why we have no reason to suppose the waking state is anything but a dream. But these are only two of the three states that we experience. We are aware every day. We are in what seems to be the waking state. We also know that there are states we call dream, but we also know there's a third state in which we are not in waking and dream. We're aware of ourselves as I am this body, whether this body or some other body. We're always aware of ourselves as a body, and we're consequently aware of the world. But there's a third state in which we are not aware of anything. However, that third state is a state we call sleep. However, though in sleep we are not aware of anything, we are aware. This is a point that most of us overlook. The very fact that we are aware of having been in a state in which we were not aware of anything means we were aware of being in that state. Of course, when we were in that state, we weren't thinking, I'm not aware of anything, because even the thought, I'm not aware of anything, wasn't there. Even the one who could think that thought is not there. There is just pure awareness. Sleep is a state of pure being and pure awareness. We are aware, but not aware of anything. If at all we want to say we're aware of something, we're aware of our own existence. But obviously our existence is not an object of awareness. So we are aware, I am. That's all. So that is a state of pure awareness. This is a very important, this is the most important point about this when we analyze our experience of the three states. Because since we exist in sleep without being aware of anything other than ourselves, that means without being aware of a body or a world, of any phenomenon whatsoever, no phenomenon can be ourselves. Now I seem to be this body, but can this body be what I actually am? No, it cannot, because I exist in sleep and I'm aware of myself in sleep without being aware of this body. If this body was myself, I couldn't be aware of myself without being aware of this body. In dream, I'm aware of myself, not as this body, some other body. But in dream, when Bhagavan talks of the word body, that is when he says ego is nothing but the false awareness, I am this body. Or in other words, that which is aware of itself as I am this body. What he meant by body is not just the physical body, because we never experience the physical body on its own as ourself. Whenever we experience this physical body, the body always seems to be alive. The life in the body is what is called prana. And not only is the body alive, nobody has ever experienced a dead body as I. Not only the body that we experience as ourselves alive, it's also seemingly awake. That is, the mind, intellect, and will are operating within it. So whenever we experience ourselves as a body, that experience, I am this body, includes the life, the mind, the intellect, and the will. So these five, the physical body, the life, the mind, the intellect, and the will, are what are called the panchakosha, the five sheaths. There, in that context, the term mind means the grosser functions of the mind. Subtler than both grosser functions, subtler functions are the functions of the intellect. Though intellect is, sometimes the term mind is used to include all of, that is the mind, intellect, will, and even ego, all are collectively called mind. But the grosser functions of the mind, the thinking, remembering, feeling, emotions, and so on, those are all the grosser function. That's called the manomaya kosha, the sheath composed of mind. Subtler than that is the jnanamaya kosha, the sheath composed of intellect. That's the reasoning, judging, discriminating, recognizing, being able to see the distinctions and so on. That is the functions of the intellect. Subtler than the intellect is the will. The will consists of, in its grosser form, it consists of likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. But all of these in their seed form are what are called vasanas, which are inclinations. The inclination, that the likings in their subtlest form are called vasanas. So the will essentially consists of vasanas. So these are all sheaths. Ego is not any of these five sheaths. Ego is all, because all these five sheaths are objects. That is, we're aware of our desires, we're aware of our likes and dislikes. But we're aware of them as objects. That is, who is aware of this, that I like to eat chocolate? Who is aware of that liking to eat chocolate? I am aware of it. So the liking to eat chocolate is something experienced by me. I am the experiencer. So the liking to eat chocolate is an object. The I who likes to eat chocolate is the subject. So ego is the subject. Ego is not any of these 5 sheaths. But whenever we rise as ego, we experience ourselves as I am this body consisting of these 5 sheaths. So though ego is distinct from the 5 sheaths, it always attaches itself to these 5 sheaths and takes them to be itself. So from this we understand, now we are experiencing ourselves as this body consisting of 5 sheaths. But these are not what we actually are, because none of these 5 sheaths exist in sleep. Some people who studied Vedanta will say, no. The Anandamaya kosha remains in sleep. Anandamaya kosha is another name for the will. That remains in sleep. It's said in all the books. That is an explanation that is given to satisfy people who want to know if nothing exists in sleep, then how do we come out of if ego completely ceases to exist in sleep, how does it come out of sleep again? So it's said, oh, the vasanas remain there, so the vasanas prompt ego to rise again. But how can vasanas exist in the absence of ego? They cannot. According to Bhagavan, sleep is a state devoid of I, devoid of mind, devoid of ego. And therefore, it is also devoid of vasanas. It's only from the perspective of ego in waking and dream, but it seems that, then those vasanas must have been there in seed form. That's our inference, because we want to have a nice explanation of how we rose again. According to Bhagavan, we never rose again. We haven't risen even now. Risen means risen as ego. We seem to have risen as ego because we don't look at ourselves. If we look at ourselves, we will see we had never risen. Our nature is not rising or doing. Our nature is just being. So, but now, so long as we, in waking and dream, we always experience ourselves as this body consisting of 5 sheaths. But this is not what we actually are. So what is required? The awareness, I am this body, is ignorance. How do we get rid of this ignorance? Only by being aware of ourselves as we actually are. How can we be aware of ourselves as we actually are? We need to investigate ourselves. So Bhagavan's path is the path of self-investigation. As I say, this word vichara is used a lot in Vedantic, particularly in Advaitic literature. But most people have failed to understand what vichara means. If you listen to the lecturers, if you ask the lecturers, what is vichara? They'll say, oh, there are different ways you can do vichara. There are different prakriyas, they call them, different methodologies. You can analyze the 3 states of waking, dream, and sleep. That's one form of vichara. You can discriminate between drisya vibhaka. You can distinguish the seer from the seen, the experience, subject from objects. That's another way you can do it. And there are different prakriyas like this. You can distinguish between what is eternal and what is ephemeral, what is changing and what is unchanging. These are all preliminaries. These are all to labor the groundwork. That is, in order to investigate what we actually are, we first need to understand what we are not. If I am this body and I'm asked to investigate myself, I can look in a mirror and I can see I've got certain features. Or if I want to know a bit more, I can go to a doctor and ask him to cut me up and see all the different bits and pieces that are made up. Research on the body is research on an object. That is not self-investigation. Research on the mind. The mind means the mind in the sense of the perceptions, the memories, and the thoughts and feelings and so on. They're all objects. Intellect and its function, its activity, its functions, they're all objects. The will, all objects. We are not here to investigate any object. We are here to investigate ourselves, the subject. And if we investigate the subject is ego. As Bhagavan says, the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to things other than itself. In other words, we seem to be ego so long as we're not looking at ourselves, so long as we're looking at other things, we seem to be ego. We seem to be, I am this body. Yes, certainly that is the case. But if instead of looking at any objects, we turn our attention back towards the subject to see who am I, ego will thereby subside. Because ego cannot rise or stand without grasping things other than itself. The first thing it grasps this body, as I am this body. And then constantly it's going out grasping things of the world. Grasping means being aware of. In order to know ourselves, we need to cease holding on to other things. We need to hold on to ourselves. But as Bhagavan says, ego is a formless phantom. So when you try to hold on to ego, it has nothing to hold on to, so it subsides, merges back into its source. What is the source from which we've risen as ego? As I say, ego rises in waking and dream, rises and stands in waking and dream. It subsides in sleep. So the place from which ego has risen and the place in which it subsides, that is the source from which ego has risen. What is that source? That is what exists in sleep. What is it that exists in sleep? Only this fundamental awareness I am. So we ourselves are the source from which we have risen as ego. So the self-investigation. So initially we seem to be investigating ego, but ego actually has no existence of its own, independent of I am. Because ego is for false awareness, I am this body. Without I am, there cannot be this false awareness. So the adhisthana or adhara, the basis, the ground from which ego rises and on which it stands and into which it subsides, that is this fundamental awareness I am, which exists in all the three states. So initially, we seem to be investigating ego. But as we go deeper in this investigation, we begin to recognize what we're investigating is not ego, the rising I. We're investigating the being I. That is I in its pure form. This is like if you see a snake, if you see a rope and mistake it to be a snake, if someone tells you, no, it's not a snake, it's only a rope, but to you, it still seems to be a snake. When you look at it, no, I think did I see it moving there? No, maybe that's its head, that's its tail, maybe it's moving. Because of we've got that idea so firmly rooted in our mind, but it's a snake. We're not easily able to root that idea out. Even if our friend is correct, but it's a rope, it's still too risky to go close, because supposing we're not mistaken, supposing our friend is mistaken. So it's very risky. But if our friend tells us, well, the only way you can get rid of this snake is to look at it carefully. If we have a little faith in our friend's words and pluck up some courage and go and look at it carefully, what do we see? We see it's just a rope. So though it seemed to be a snake, it was always actually just a rope. Likewise, though we now seem to be ego, the rising I that grasps our body as itself, what we actually are is only the being I. So if we look at ourselves cleanly enough, we will see that we are not ego, we are just that pure being, pure awareness, I am. So this is Bhagavan's teachings simplified, Bhagavan's teachings in a nutshell.
Thank you, Michael. Great combination with these two questions, and it covered actually.
Well, they're inseparable. They're inseparable.
Yeah. Is there any question?
What is the purpose of if you go to the lecturers, the learned swamis who talk about Vedanta, they will talk for hours on end about this waking, dream, and sleep, and why we are not this body, why we're not this mind, why we're not this, why so on and so forth. But what's the practical implication of this? Bhagavan says very beautifully in verse 32 of Uludunapadu, when the Vedas say you are that, I paraphrase it here because he puts it a bit more, he puts it in a very aphoristic way. So I paraphrase slightly. When the Vedas say you are that, what should our response be? Oh, if I am that, then what am I? That should be our response. So Bhagavan says, when the Vedas say you are that, if instead of knowing and being us, being by investigating that, by investigating what? That means, what am I? Thinking I am not this body, I am that Brahman, is, I think he says, I think that's the verse in which he says, it is due to weakness of mind. Wait a second, I'll just get the verse. Yes, it's due to lack of strength, he says. What he says in that verse is, when the Vedas proclaim that is you, in other words, Tattvamasi, instead of oneself knowing oneself as what, thinking I am that, not this, is due to non-existence of strength, because that alone is always seated as oneself. What that implies is, when the Vedas proclaim you are that, what we should do, we should investigate ourselves. What am I? And thereby know and be what we actually are. Instead of doing so, if we merely think, I am that, I am Brahman, I'm not this body, that is merely due to non-existence of strength. We miss the point. When Vedas point out you are that, they don't expect us to think, I am that, I'm not this body. When you're told this is not a snake, this is a rope, what is the use of merely sitting there thinking, this is not a snake, this is a rope, this is not a snake, this is a rope? So long as you see it as a snake, you're still too afraid to go close to it. So merely thinking that it's not a snake but a rope, so long as it seems to you to be a snake, that thought has very little power. That's why Bhagavan says it's due to non-existence of strength. If you have the strength of courage, if you really believe it's a rope, not a snake, go and look at it carefully. Confirm your belief. There's no point in believing something, but is not your experience. You need to confirm. Whatever is said, it's of no use to us unless we confirm it for ourselves. So we need to look at the snake and see what it actually is. If it's a snake, it will hiss at us. But if we look at it closely enough, we'll see, it's just a rope, it's harmless. So merely thinking, I am not this, I am that, or merely going on studying the text, merely going on talking about these things for ages you can go on for lifetime studying Vedanta without understanding, without getting the point. The point is, the whole purpose of that is all of Vedanta is summarized in those three words, Tattvamasi. You are that. So what is the implication of that? If you are that, we can forget about that. We need to investigate you. That we don't know. You we do know. That we know ourselves. We don't know that. In order to know that, we need to know ourselves. So we need to investigate ourselves.
One thing came on in mind, Michael. In some Vedantic teachers, they say that these three states occur, but our real state is the fourth state, so to speak. So now in Bhagavan's point of view, the third state, or this deep sleep, is actually our real state. And there's no need for thinking about a fourth state. So actually the third state is the real true state.
Well, Bhagavan says, there's a verse in Bandham. Bhagavan says, it's only for those who take these three states to be real, but that is said to be the fourth. But the truth is, that is the only state. What is called the fourth is the only state. That state is our state even now. That state, the fourth, is a state of pure awareness. Now, the pure awareness is seemingly concealed by our awareness of other things. In waking and dream, we're aware of ourself, I am, and we're also aware of so many other things. So the pure awareness is seemingly obscured by the awareness of other things. In the difference between waking and dream on one hand and sleep on the other hand is in sleep we are not aware of anything other than ourselves. So sleep is the state of pure awareness. So Sleep is the fourth state without anything superimposed on it. Waking and dream is the fourth state with something imposed on it. Fourth state means the only state.
Maybe, is there any questions at this point? We've gone through basically the first two questions quite nicely. Is there any questions about these three states, or any idea and other thoughts about this, or Bhagavan's teaching as attention to the I or ourself, and not and attention to anything else?
If I may ask a question, yes. One more. And my impression is that Bhagavan's teaching and logic is very concise, and in a way it is a sort of binary. Like there is real and there is not real, unreal, and there are no things in between. At times, to my mind, and maybe to the minds of many other people, maybe it would be easier to grasp when you say that, say, the dream or the waking state, they are real, but deep sleep is even more real than those. Or would it change or distort Bhagavan's teaching if we say so?
Yes, it would. Normally in Vedanta, they talk about three levels of reality, or three different types of reality. There's Paramartika Satya, that is the ultimate reality. There's Vivaharika Satya, the transactional reality. And there's also Pratibhasika Satya. Some Advaitins say Pratibhasika Satya and Vivaharika Satya, they're two different things. Some acknowledge, but actually they're one and the same. Vivaharika means transactional. Pratibhasika means seeming. And it's sometimes said that the ultimate truth is Paramartika. What we experience in waking state is Vivaharika. What we experience in dream is Pratibhasika. It's merely a seeming reality. That explanation satisfies those who take waking to be something other than a dream. But the deeper Vedanta, the deeper Advaita, says there's no, like Gaudapada in Mandukya Karika, there's no difference between waking and dream. So the Vivaharika and the Pratibhasika are one. But though they're called Vivaharika Satya and Pratibhasika Satya, transactional reality and seeming reality, they're actually not reality at all. They're wholly unreal. There can be no degrees of reality. That's why I said, according to Bhagavan, real means what is real is what actually exists. What is unreal is what does not actually exist, even if it seems to exist. So there cannot be degrees of, if we want to, we can say there are degrees of unreality, but they're all, if it's unreal, it's wholly unreal. There's not really even degrees of unreality. There are different perspectives. Within unreality, there are so many different perspectives, different ways of viewing things. But unreality is wholly unreal. Reality alone is real. So there is no halfway point. Regarding what you say about binary, you say there is the real and there is the unreal. No. According to Advaita, there is only the real, there is no unreal. Unreal merely seems to exist. It doesn't actually exist. That's one point. Another point is, if you want to have, now there seems to be the unreal. There is always what is real. What is real is I am. Everything else is what seems to be real. Is there anything in between these two? According to Bhagavan, what is in between is ego. Ego is ego is called Chit Jada Granti. Chit means awareness. That's the pure awareness, Sat Chit. So Chit is real. that is the I am element of ego. Jada means what is not aware. What is not aware is unreal because it seems to exist only in the view of something else. So ego is a conflated mixture of what is real, namely the fundamental awareness I am, and what is unreal, namely the body consisting of 5 sheaths, which is jada. So it is called chit jada granti, but not granti, formed by the entanglement of these two. So if you want to have something in between the real and the unreal, that is ego. But ego as ego is unreal. Ego as I am is real. Just like the snake is unreal as a snake, but it's real as a rope. Ego is unreal as ego, but it's real as I am, as the pure awareness I am. So ego, that's why we cannot find any reality in the external world, in any objects, in any phenomena. They are wholly unreal. If we want to find reality, we have to go through ego, because ego has an element of reality in it. That is that fundamental awareness I am, that is real. So we can find reality only in ourselves. Other things seem to be real. As I say, because we take a body to be ourselves, the body seems to be real. And consequently, everything else seems to be real. So other things seem to be real so long as we are attending to them. What is actually real is only ourself. Not ourself as ego, but ourself as we actually are, as the fundamental awareness I am. So in a sense, yes, ego is what's in between. So we have risen as ego, and it's, so to speak, through ego, we have to go back to our source, because ego is what has to go back to its source. We have to leave everything else and return to our source. And only when ego dissolves in its source will everything else dissolve along with it. And then we'll know there is one only without a second. There is the real only without any unreal. Is that a satisfactory answer?
Yes. I just referred to the binary terminology.
Yeah. Well,
in fact, it's like unary. There is only Satchitananda. Yes. But when we are speaking, we term some things that are unreal, although they don't exist.
Yeah. Well, unreal means it doesn't exist. It merely seems to exist.
Mm-hmm. And one more.
So but when we are using language, when we are using thought, we are in the realm of duality. Thought and language occur only in duality. So this appearance of duality, of binary, of real and unreal, existent, non-existent, knowledge, ignorance, all these pairs of opposites, they all seem to exist in the view of ego. If we investigate ego, and only when we investigate ego will all these pairs of opposites cease to exist, and what is actually real alone will remain. So language will always entail, we cannot get away from duality so long as we're using language. We cannot get away from duality so long as we're using thought. We can get away from duality only by holding on to ourselves and sinking back into the heart. Sorry, you were about to ask something else.
Yeah, one more, actually, maybe two small questions. About body, you mentioned Bhagavan uses such term as body. And would it be right to say that body in his language, in Bhagavan's language, means our bodily experience? Not just our body, but what we perceive as body, what we think as body, what we experience being in a body.
Nothing exists independent of our awareness of it. So this body is just our awareness of this body. This microphone in front of me, it is just my awareness of the microphone. The microphone doesn't exist independent of my awareness of it. This body doesn't exist independent of our awareness of it.
But what does Bhagavan mean by saying we are aware of ourselves as a body? It means like we are aware of ourselves as a ego.
Well, ego is that which is aware of itself as a body. Ego is not the body, it is that which is aware of itself as the body.
Mm-hmm.
That is, as ego, we are always aware of ourselves as I am this body.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
But the body, as Bhagavan said, the body is jada. The body has no awareness of its own. So the body is not aware of itself as I. As he says in verse 24 of Uludunapadu, he begins by saying, Jada udul nane nadu. But jada body does not say I. There, when he says say, he's using that metaphorically to mean the body is not aware of itself as I. Why is it not aware of itself as I? Because it's jada. That means it's not aware at all. And the body there means all the five sheaths, the life, the mind, the intellect, the will, they're all jada. None of them are aware. What is aware is ego. And because ego takes itself to be these five sheaths, the five sheaths seem to be aware. The body seems to be conscious.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the body that is conscious. It's the I that has mistaken itself to be that body that is conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And because this body seems to be conscious, all the other bodies I see, they also seem to be conscious.
Mm-hmm. So body is a kind of projection of ego, yes?
Everything is a projection of ego. Ego is the creator of everything. Ego is the first cause.
And one more question, the
Yes,
last
certainly.
one, maybe, about awareness. Like you mentioned, and in Bhagavan's teaching, it's mentioned that when we are in deep sleep, we are just aware, not aware of anything particular. And is this kind of awareness just awareness without any attributes or adjuncts to it? Is it the same as awareness of not anything, but of everything? Like,
it's not awareness of anything at all. There's there's
not even awareness of everything. Yes.
Everything. It depends what you mean by everything. If you mean there is only one thing, so everything is one. When you say everything is one, you're denying the multiplicity. But many people, they read a little bit of Advaita and they say, oh, everything is one. They don't think deeply what that means. If everything is one, then there's no multiplicity at all. So long as you're aware of multiplicity, you're not aware of the oneness. That is, there's one interpretation of Vedanta called Beda Abeda Vedanta. It's the basis of many others. It's the basis of Vishishtadvaita. It's the basis of the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's form of Advaita called Achintya Abeda Vedanta. But the basic idea, Beda means difference. Abeda means non-difference. So according to Beda Abeda, there's difference in non-difference and non-difference in difference. When Bhagavan was asked about that, he said that is meaningless. If there is difference, there is not non-difference. If there is non-difference, there is not difference. You cannot have the two side by side. I mean, the two cannot coexist. You cannot say there are no differences and there are differences. It's a contradiction. So the truth is Abeda. There are no differences whatsoever. All differences appear only in the view of ego. Now I've seen what your question was. But,
yes. So, for example, if we are aware of anything, just by operation of our mind, we have a kind of boundary that something, I don't know, a table or some phenomenon, a war, we see where this table is or where this event is and where it is not. And so if we are aware of anything, we are by definition, we are not aware of something else. Just there is a void in our awareness when we are aware of something, for example.
When we are aware of everything, in the sense of many things, we are aware of the one thing as many. And according to Bhagavan, seeing as many is ignorance. Seeing the one as what actually exists is only one. So seeing it as many is ignorance. In verse 13 of Ulladu, he says, Nanabam jnanam ajnanamam. That literally means awareness that is many is ignorance. But in an earlier version of that verse, he put Nanabai kankindra jnanam ajnanam. That means the awareness that sees as many is ignorance. Because that is what actually exists is only one. But in that verse, he says, Jnanamam tane me, oneself who is awareness, alone, pure awareness, alone is real. Jnana, alone is real. In the earlier version, he says, Jnanam andre unme, that is, Jnana, pure awareness, alone is real. Awareness that sees as many is ignorance. Why is it ignorant? Because what actually exists is only one. If you see the one as many, that is ignorance.
And so this complete awareness, it implies like this true awareness which we have in deep sleep. It implies completeness, yes, not void. Yeah.
It is. Bhagavan describes it beautifully in verse 28 of Upadesha Undiyar. In that verse, he says, if one knows what the real nature of oneself is, then anadi means beginningless. Ananta means endless, limitless, infinite. Akhanda, that means unbroken, undivided. Satchidananda. So it's beginningless and endless in the sense that it's beyond time. It is endless in the sense that it has no limits. It's infinite. Being undivided means neither has it got external limits nor has it got internal limits. If you divide something, if you cut a cake into 8 pieces, you've got the external limit of the cake, and you've also got internal limit. Each piece is separate from each other piece. But this is not like that. Satchidananda has no external limits, and it's got no internal limits. It's indivisible.
Thank you. That's clear.
That will really be... It may seem clear to the mind.
Clearer.
Clearer, exactly. It becomes clear only when we turn within and lose ourselves completely in that. Bhagavan says beautifully in verse 20 or 21 of Ulladu, he ends by saying, Unadal Khan. That's in verse... verse 21. He says what he says in verse 21 is, if one asks what is the truth of many texts that say oneself, seeing God. That is, some books talk about oneself seeing oneself. Other books talk about seeing God. So what is the truth of all these texts? He answers, since oneself is one, how is oneself to see oneself? If it is not possible to see, how to see God? That means if we can't see ourselves, how can we see God? Then he gives an answer to that. Unadal Khan. That literally means becoming food is seeing. So if you want to see God, you have to be swallowed by God. When we are completely devoured by him, then we become him. Not even become, we remain as him because we are always nothing other than God. But when we are devoured by him, that is when ego is completely eradicated. What remains, that state of pure being and pure awareness that remains, that is the state of oneself seeing oneself. That is the state of seeing God. So that's beautiful, beautiful saying, becoming food is seeing. So
Yes.
Bhagavan's teachings are all about eradication of ego. The whole problem is ego. The solution to the problem is eradication of ego. So we must be devoured by God.
So according to Bhagavan, we don't need to acquire anything. We just need to get rid of adjuncts,
yes.
right?
Bhagavan said, if jnana were something to be acquired, it would be lost. Whatever comes has to go. So such a jnana would be useless. But we ourselves are jnana. Why are we not aware of ourselves as jnana? Because we're not looking at ourselves, we're looking elsewhere. And that brings us to the next question. But Yussi had asked, why is Advaita and Bhagavan's path called the straight path? All spiritual paths can be divided into two. Either we're looking at ourselves or we're looking at other things. This is the path of looking at ourselves. All other paths are looking at something else, attending to something else. If they're looking at oneself, then they're the same path. So we can look only in one of two directions. Either we look at ourselves or we look away from ourselves. All other paths are, in one way or another, looking at things other than ourselves. But one path that is looking at ourselves, well, looking at ourselves is by definition this one path of Atma-vichara. This is Bhagavan's path. This is the true path of Advaita. Although the vast majority of Advaitins miss the point, this looking at ourselves, that is what Advaita is all about. So long as you meditate on anything other than yourself, you've got duality, you've got a subject and an object. So what is Advaita meditation? It can only be meditation on ourselves. So long as you meditate on anything other than ourselves, you've got two there. So the true path of Advaita is this is the true nididhyasana, the true deep contemplation on ourselves alone. And why is it the straight path? Because what is our aim? Our aim is to know ourselves. Our aim is to see ourselves. What is the straight path to see ourselves? Look at ourselves. What is the straight way to look to see the sun? You have to look at it. You have to turn and look. People sometimes talk about what is the method of self-investigation or what is the technique. Technique and method are not really appropriate. What is the technique for watching a film on television? You have to just look at it. That's the technique. So if you want to see anything, you have to look at it. So if you call looking a technique, okay, it's a technique, it's a method, but it's too simple to be called a method. A method or a technique are needed for difficult things. There is nothing easier than looking at ourselves. It seems difficult because we have so much liking to look at other things. In order to look at ourselves, we need to give up looking at other things. So long as we're looking at other things, our attention is only partial, at best, it's only partially on ourselves. Most of the time when we're looking at other things, we're completely ignoring ourselves. Ourself means the basic awareness I am. Even when we're thinking so much about this person we take ourselves to be, we're still attending to something other than ourselves because this person is not what we actually are. So long as I'm worrying about Michael and Michael's problems and how to solve Michael's problems, I'm not attending to myself. I'm attending to this fellow called Michael, who is not myself, who is just an appearance, who appears in waking and disappears in sleep. He existed. He seems to exist now. He didn't exist before his death. He's not going to exist after his death. He seemed to exist he didn't exist before his birth. He's not going to exist after his death. So he's just a temporary appearance. So this fellow Michael is not myself. So long as I'm concerned about Michael, my attention is going in the wrong direction. So thinking about ourselves or attending to ourselves means attending only to I am, not to any of the five sheaves. So this is the direct path because we're looking directly at what we want to know, what we want to see. What could be straighter or more direct than looking to see what we want to see? So all other paths, all yoga, all the this is the highest part of bhakti. That's why Bhagavan says in after describing different practices of bhakti, japa, puja, japa, dhyana, and grading them according to their relative efficacy in purifying the mind, he then says in verse 8 of Upadeshundya, Anya bhavatin avanaha mahum ananya bhavamai undipara anaitimnum utmum undipara. Anya bhava means meditating on something other than oneself. In this context, it means meditating on God as something other than ourselves. Rather than anya bhava, ananya bhava. Ananya means what is not other. If you meditate on what is not other than yourself, how can you meditate on what is not other than yourself? Only by meditating on yourself. So ananya bhava means self-attentiveness, being self-attentive or investigating ourselves. Ananya bhava, abhanaha mahum ananya bhava. Abhanaha mahum means in which he is I. So with the understanding that God is not something other than ourselves, but is what is shining in our heart as I, when we understand that, what should we meditate on? On I alone. So that rather than meditating on God as something other than ourselves, meditating on him as I alone is anaitinam uttamam. That is the best of all. So this is the highest practice of bhakti. All other practices of bhakti is meditating on some name or form of God, or worshipping some name or form of God. That's something anya, something other than ourselves. And yoga is the aim of yoga. Patanjali says right at the beginning of the Yoga Sutra, yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the subjugation or the curbing or controlling or restraining of chitta vrittis. That means mental activity. So the aim of yoga is to stop the mental activity. But so long as you're concerned about stopping the mental activity, your attention is on something other than yourself. Bhagavan, on the other hand, says, however many thoughts rise, so what? Big deal. Bhagavan is least concerned about thoughts. As and when any thought appears, to whom what do we need to do? We need to investigate to whom it appears. The thoughts are very welcome because they come to remind us, but our attention is going away from ourselves. So turn the attention back to ourselves. So thoughts come as warnings. Hey, you're looking in the wrong direction. Don't look at us. Look at yourself. That's what every thought is telling us, but we miss the point. So yoga is preoccupied with chitta vrittis and how to control the chitta vrittis. And because they're just trying to control the chitta vrittis, they end up in a state they call Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or they've got some other name. I've forgotten what it's called. I've forgotten what the technical term in yoga, but it's what is otherwise called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which according to Bhagavan is just a state of manolaya. Manolaya means a temporary dissolution of mind. Why is the mind only temporarily dissolved? Because to bring about the permanent dissolution of mind, manonasa, we need to know what we actually are. And we can know what we actually are only by looking at ourselves. Merely withdrawing our attention from other things doesn't enable us to see ourselves. Every day when we fall asleep, we're too tired to continue thinking, continue projecting other things. So the chitta vritti nirodha is effortlessly achieved every day. When we're too tired to continue thinking, we go into a state of manolaya. So yoga is an incomplete path because it only leads you to manolaya, and manolaya is just a dead end. You can't make any progress when you're in manolaya. You have to come back again. So Bhagavan says, if at all you want to practice yoga, pranayama, or any other yoga practices, practice them to a certain extent till you reduce the speed at which the mind is racing outwards. And then you use that relatively calm mind to turn within. This is what he implies later in Upadeshundya. In verses 11 and 12, he explains that since the mind and the breath both originate from the same source, if you control one, you control the other. If you control the mind, if you reduce the speed at which the mind is going outwards, the breath will calm down. Or if you calm down the breath, the mind will also calm down. So this is a means to pacify, to calm the mind, is pranayama. But then Bhagavan says in verse 13, but dissolution of mind is of two kinds, laya and nasa. That which is in laya will rise again. That which is in nasa will never rise again. So what is our aim? Our aim is not laya, our aim is nasa. Sleep is manolaya. Nirvikalpa samadhi is manolaya. Coma is manolaya. Swoon is manolaya. General anesthesia is manolaya. Any state in which the mind is dissolved, but from which it comes back, is manolaya. All these states of manolaya, the reason they are temporary, the reason the mind comes back again, is because we go into those states due to, in the case of sleep, due to tiredness. In the case of coma, maybe due to head injuries. In the case of general anesthesia, due to some drugs that have been administered. In the case of nirvikalpa samadhi, due to the pranayama and other yoga practices. None of these bring about the permanent destruction of mind, because the mind can be destroyed, that ego can be destroyed only by knowing itself. And in order to know itself, it needs to see itself. So self-investigation alone can bring about the destruction of mind. So in verse 13, Bhagavan says two types of dissolution of mind. Laya, which is temporary, because mind's going to rise again, or nasa, which is permanent, because mind never rises again. Then in verse 14, he says, the mind which is calmed by pranayama, only if that mind is sent on the orvari, the investigating path, will its form die. The investigating path means the path of self-investigation. So what Bhagavan used to say is, if you calm down the mind by means of pranayama, before you subside in manolaya, you should then turn the mind back within to see who am I. If you don't do so, you'll end up in manolaya. If you send the mind on this investigating path, in other words, if you turn the attention back within to see who am I, then only will the mind dissolve in laya. In nasa, in permanent destruction. So does that adequately answer why it's the straight path?
I think so.
But nowadays, because people have heard this term, direct path or straight path, this term is bandied around very freely by people without understanding what the direct path actually is. Some people talk about direct paths in plural. How can there be more than one direct path? If you want to get from A to B, there's only one straight line between A and B. Any line other than the straight line is a crooked line. So Bhagavan's path is not a crooked path. This is the straight path. And the term in Tamil he uses is Nair-bari. Nair means direct, straight. It also means straightforward, honest. There's no trickery here. We cannot fool ourselves in this path. If we are really following this path, all our insincerity and all our fooling ourselves will be fully exposed. So this is a path of perfect humility. If we're really following this path, we will become more and more humble, because we will see.
Now that it was Easter, somehow nowadays even more, I get all these Christ's teachings and sayings, which almost always include this I. And I've now somehow always related straight to Bhagavan's path, because I see no difference between these. I am the path, I'm the way, and all this. There's always the I, which of course normally we detect to be some personality. But if in Bhagavan's point point of view,
Yes.
there's no difference at all. And it's also a direct path. It's like Christ said, his path is very easy. The yoke is easy to carry, but it's a direct, narrow path.
Straight and narrow.
Straight and narrow. Yes.
Why it is narrow? In the Upanishads, they talk about this path being the razor's edge. Why? Because we have to remain balanced. On the one hand, there's thought. On the other hand, there's manolaya. We have to remain balanced in a state of samadhi, balanced state of mind. If we go a little this way, we get carried away by thoughts. If we go a little this way, we subside in laya. We need to go between thoughts and laya along this straight and narrow, this razor's edge path.
Exactly. I think Lena
Michael,
has
can I comment on also? I mean, that I just want to say that I was a little bit noting down what you were saying, and this in the dialogues with Yaroslav, for example, also it is interesting. I mean that after what you said now, what we have to do is just stop doing anything. I mean, just we have to get self-realized immediately.
Yes.
I mean, it is because everything is absolutely clear. You have to just abandon everything. I mean, give up everything. Whatever comes to your mind, whatever you see, it is just nothing. It is just Maya. Maya constantly keeps you and holds you tightly in her hands. So I mean that what you have to do is just ignore.
Yes, but
yes,
merely just ignoring is not sufficient.
Of course, I don't know.
Because if we just ignoring, we ignore everything when we fall asleep. We end up in laya. We need to stop doing anything. We need to just be. But how can we just be? We need to hold on to ourselves, because hold on to our own being.
No, I think I haven't finished.
Okay, sorry.
She's not finished yet.
No, it's don't be sorry, Michael. It's just me. I mean that I made this gap. So I mean that yes, we have the only thing that has some value is I am. This is the only thing, and we just because we don't know what kind of bliss it is. We cannot evaluate. We don't know because we even don't appreciate too much our deep sleep state.
Yes.
So I mean that even though it is quite great state, but we just somehow we like. That is why we constantly. I mean that it is absolutely. I mean again, just I repeat what you said, but in my own words. That goodness, I lost my this thought. That I mean that is why we constantly are talking about world. About this world, because we are so interested in everything.
Yes.
And whatever it is, I mean that outer world, inner world. Anyway, it's world. It's world.
Yes.
It's something that it's objects. It's something that we like or don't like, which is absolutely, I think, similar things. Because what you say is that if it is snake, then if you approach, it hisses at you. If it is not snake, it is when it is rope, it doesn't hiss. But I mean this hissing, it means whatever it can be, either something pleasant or something horrible. Both things are absolutely equal because we react. I mean that we are interested in dealing with it.
Yes.
I mean that it's not just we can just don't and just remember that we. Actually, it doesn't mean anything, and the greatest bliss is us. I mean that.
Yes.
So I mean that, but to just understand that even when we experience something pleasant, that it is hissing at us. So we have to just be very much strong.
Yes, yes,
because sometimes these horrible things that we have to go through and some of these experiences, they are maybe we just when we have these experiences we just say that this world is something, it's crap, it's something horrible, we don't want to deal with it, it's something that we don't want. But when something good appears, it is even more horrible in this sense, because it just catches you immediately. This is how Maya works.
Yes, exactly.
So you have to be very strong, I mean, to somehow resist.
Yes.
So both are hissing.
Yes.
And we both have to, like Bhagavad Gita says that, at least this is the first source that I clearly read, that whatever happens, it is absolutely the same.
Yes.
So you have to just constantly anyway to remember about your real nature.
Yeah.
And because it is, I mean, it is this when we, as I understand, when we experience our real nature, this is the full satisfaction. We cannot get any more satisfaction from whatever object. I mean, we now talk about very serious thing, actually, because it is satisfaction, it is happiness, like you say. Yes, it is. This is the only satisfaction.
Yes.
Because otherwise, we are like some poor things.
Yes.
We are constantly like some, I don't know, even like who knows what. We are just victims of our own imagination, of our own ignorance. We are just victims.
Yes.
So, I mean, yes. So, and also considering what Yaroslav was saying, that awareness of everything is as if it can be like the same as awareness of something, of everything, of every awareness of I am. I mean that.
Yes.
It's a very nice thing was we heard with Yusi from Sarva Priyananda. He also mentioned someone else from whom he heard this, but it was very beautiful that he said that when we are aware of something, even though we can call it everything, but we are still aware of something. It is something anyway.
Yes,
it's everything. This is still object.
Yes.
Anyway, so I mean, whatever beautiful word we can give to him, to everything, it's not. Anyway, it's object. And he says that object is very beautiful, by the way, beautiful magic of language. This object means that it objects eternity. It objects, it limits immediately us to these objects.
Yes.
We are eternal, and all of a sudden we start just attach much importance to some object.
Yes.
Which actually, and it bothers us, or I don't know, it makes us unhappy, or makes us happy, or whatever makes us thinking, or something. I mean, that think, or just this arises activity of our mind that we are processing all this information and so dealing. So I mean that this whatever we were of. I mean, except us, if you just being, right? So whatever it is object that objects this. I mean, that denies eternity.
Yes.
And this limitlessness.
Yes.
So I mean that this is very beautiful. Just we found it.
Yes.
Very beautiful.
So long as there are objects, there's a division. There's a subject and object.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
But the problem lies not with the objects. What is really objectionable is not the object, it is the subject. Because it's only in the view of the subject that the objects exist. So it is this subject we need to investigate.
Mm-hmm. Our ego, you mean, yes.
Ego, yes.
Yes, which ego itself is very interesting thing, in my opinion, and I'm always repeating this thing, that I mean that ego is just phenomenon in the sense that when it looks at us, it is like we are, as we are. I mean this.
Yes.
When it looks out, it is ego.
Yes.
I mean that it is nothing actually. It is nothing. It's our own ability or our own desire to look at something.
It is a chameleon. It takes on the color of whatever it looks at.
Yes. But first of all, you have to be interested in looking at something.
Yes.
this interest.
We must be interested not in doing or in knowing. We must be interested just in being.
Yes, but when we are interested just in being, we are not ego.
No. Because the very nature of ego is to be interested only in other things.
Exactly. So ego, like Bhagavan says, it is some phantom that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. It is. Yes.
That is why Bhagavan says grace is absolutely essential. That is the power to turn back within cannot come from ego, because the very nature of ego is to go outwards. So some power greater than ego is necessary to pull it back within. That is the power of grace.
Yes,
But that grace is not something other than ourselves. We ourselves are that grace. Grace is our real nature.
Yes, this is what I want to say, that this also this question of grace. It's an interesting question because it somehow it sounds interestingly as if something exists again separately from us. I mean,
Yes.
Which is not.
That is the usual understanding.
Yes.
In religions where they take God to be other than themselves, they take grace to be something that is to come from God to us.
Yes.
But according to Bhagavan, God is nothing other than ourselves. And God and his grace are one. So grace is what is always shining in our heart as I. But that and the nature of grace is that is the nature. Since God is ourself, since Bhagavan is ourself, he doesn't see us as something other than himself. So he loves us as himself. And that love he has for us is what sows the seed of love in our heart to turn back within. So as Bhagavan said, Guru is pushing from outside and pulling from within. And without that push and pull from Guru, we are eternally damned.
Yes.
Because the nature of ego is to always go outwards.
It looks like the very our desire and desire to continue practice and efforts that we put into practicing. This is grace.
But that is not really desire, because
No,
desire is for something other than ourselves. This is love. We cannot turn within with desire. We can only turn within with love, because desire will always take the mind outwards.
Yes.
It's essentially the desire and love are the same. They both, but the outwardly directed love is called desire. The inwardly directed desire is called love.
Yes, it's too gross word to describe.
Yes. Because desire is all about getting for me, whereas love is all about giving me. It's complete surrender.
Yes, even I was using this word desire. It is not even. I didn't somehow put this getting into because I mean that it is so. In my opinion, it is so hard to get it.
Yes. And also, it's. I mean, the reason I distinguish love and desire, it's not ultimately the words don't matter. Even Bhagavan talks about desire. He says in verse 60 of Aksharamamai, in me who had no love for you, you gave me desire for you. That is, you gave me that liking to know you, to give myself to you. So we generally, when we use desire, we're talking about getting something else for me. That's why I made that distinction. But we have to be, so long as we understand what we're talking about, the words we use don't matter.
Yes, because even I use this desire without any.
But even Bhagavan has used it. So
I mean, to get something from it's so difficult to get that something from that you have to really try hard to, and not trying to get something like in a material sense, but you understand that it's much more subtle and beautiful, something that it cannot be grasped by just desire.
If we desire to get God, there's one price to be paid. We have to give ourselves. God will give himself to us. God is a very, very calculative businessman. He will give himself to us only if we give ourselves to him. So if we have desire for God, we must be willing to give ourselves entirely.
Which is quite, I have to say, maybe, I don't know, of course, we all want immediately to be satisfied in full. I mean, to get this self-realization. Because
we all want that. The
Yes.
problem is, in spite of all our learning, all our studying, you all are saying, oh, I understand Bhagavan's teachings. The truth is, our understanding is still very superficial.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we had really understood Bhagavan's teachings, our mind would not be going outwards.
Exactly.
Why does our mind go outwards? Because we still believe happiness is to be obtained in things other than ourselves.
We are still, how is it, how to call it? We are still so involved in reacting to this world.
Yes.
Well, the way things are going at the moment in the world, it doesn't convince that much anymore.
It's not the most appealing world at the moment. No.
But by the way, Michael, what if I noticed also interesting thing when you read news, for example, and Yaroslav understands also, and when you read about all these horrible things that are going on there in Ukraine,
Yes.
when you read what is going really on, when you read what they do to people,
Oh God.
I take it's impossible not to react. It's impossible. You just it's you cannot. You are ready to cry every time. It's
It's really it's
incredible. Again, how to just abandon? How to just say it's not going on. I understand. I understand everything. I mean, but this is this hissing when world is hissing at us. This is how it also hissing.
Yes.
We are very much attached to these things.
But we need to understand, when we look at the world, so many horrible things are happening.
Yes.
But this is all our own creation. All this appears because we have risen as ego. World is full of horrible things. If we look at human beings, there's this one species, we are capable of the greatest acts of love and kindness and caring, and also the most horrendous things we do to each other. A war is a time that brings out both.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We see the most horrible crimes being committed. Women, the maternity hospitals being bombed, children being killed, old people being killed indiscriminately. Horrible, horrible things. But at the same time, we see so much kindness, so much caring.
Exactly.
How the people of Poland have opened their arms and accepted more than 1 million refugees.
Yes, we know.
It shows human nature is capable of terrible things and also great things. But all these opposites, good and evil, kindness and selfishness, or everything, it all appears only in the view of ego. Only when we rise as ego are all these things seemingly existent. So the ultimate solution is only to turn within. However beautiful we find the world, or however ugly, however horrifying we find the world, the solution is the same. So long as there's beauty, there will be ugliness. So long as there's kindness, there will be cruelty. This is the nature of the world. The only solution, the place where we are beyond all these pairs of opposites, is only deep in our own heart.
And after all, accepting that it's all ajata and nothing.
Ultimately, yes.
Nothing has happened. It seems to happen. But
merely saying it's all in ajata, nothing even seems to happen. Nothing happens at all. The seeming is only in the view of ego. In ajata, there's no ego at all. That is the ultimate truth. But in order to experience that ultimate truth, we need to look within. We need to find that within ourselves. Merely saying, oh, everything is it's all ajata, there's nothing, it doesn't solve the problem. So long as there's one to talk about ajata, there is still a problem.
It's like all these sayings, all is mental and all is this and that. It means they're just sayings which are true, but don't help much if we don't.
Yeah. Well, we need to consider the practical implications of philosophy. Is useful only to the extent that it has, but we apply it in practice. So we need to understand the practical implication of all these things. Tattvamasi sounds very nice. But what is the practical application? The practical implication? If I am that, then what am I? That is what we need to investigate.
It's normally missed, that point.
Yes.
Stops by this saying and everybody understands it, but nobody practices it.
Yeah. Because it's the very nature of the mind. It's the very nature of ego to go outwards. That's why that's why Bhagavan said, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. We need to have all-consuming love in order to turn within and surrender ourselves. Turning within is the easiest of all things, but we need to be willing. We need to be wholeheartedly willing to turn within. But why it seems to us to be difficult to hold on to self-attentiveness is that we have so much liking to hold on to other things. We're not willing to let go of everything else. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunapadu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what this ego is giving up everything. So until we're willing to give up everything, we cannot investigate ourselves. Or our investigation will be very, very shallow, very superficial investigation. Investigation can become deep only to the extent to which we're willing to let go of everything else. That is why grace is so important, because it has to be a power greater than ego to pull ego within. But that grace is not something that comes from outside. Grace works through us grace is what manifests in us in the form of love to turn within. But that love to turn within doesn't come from ego. It comes from our source. It comes from Bhagavan.
Be my guest. Len, you have
Yeah.
Hi,
Michael.
Hi.
Yes, can I just say, like, you just said that we have to willing to look in, and so when we in this situation, like we see lots of wars and lots of challenging situations, and it also can be an opportunity to the desire for more happiness. So so that I mean, if everything is good and you have a beautiful house, you have a beautiful family, everything is fine, and I mean, you will be too satisfied with your situation, and you will lose the interest into why I need to look in. I'm pretty good. I'm fine. You're healthy body, and you don't have any disease. And I asked several of my friends, they are like, what's the use to look in? I'm pretty good. So I mean, if you are in a difficult situation, if people really suffering, and maybe it will, like, you have more desire to looking for what the world is, what is happening, and is that real? Or and I talk lots of people in China, and with the quarantine, very bad quarantine, and lots of people, they will tell me, like, it's like a dream. I don't know if it's real. So I mean, the situation really make them think, is that real, the world? So I mean, maybe it's an opportunity to give us a chance to look in.
It is. But all these things are two-edged swords. When things like this, when terrible things are happening in the world, that draws our attention out more. What's happening in the world? This is terrible. Our mind is so caught up in all these terrible things. But we can respond either in one of two ways. Either our mind goes out more and more to be more and more concerned about these things, or
yes.
think more deeply. Anyway, whether our life is a peaceful life or a life with a life of wealth or a life of poverty, a life of peace or a life of war and conflict and strife or whatever it is, this life is temporary. We're all going to die one day anyway. Even if we live in very peaceful times, terrible diseases come. I mean, even if everyone is very nice to you and everything, if a disease comes, so
you never know.
There's so much potential for suffering in this life.
Yes.
It's important to recognize this.
Yeah.
But it's true what you say, but when we face difficulties in life, that is opportunities, but we have to make use of those opportunities.
Yes.
In the Mahabharata, after the war is over, when the Panchapandavas, they were victorious, they won the war, they claimed the kingdom, but was rightfully theirs. Then Krishna said to them and to their mother, any boon you wish to pray for, I will give you. And Kunti Devi, the mother of the Panchapandavas, she prayed to Krishna, always keep us in hardship, always give us troubles. And he said, what a foolish thing you are asking for. She said, no, only when we're in trouble, we're always thinking of you. So I asked nothing else, but you always keep us in. So it is, the adversity in life is a blessing, but we have to take advantage of that blessing.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Michael, can I add?
Yes.
The also interesting thing is that when horrible times change to good times.
Yes.
Because for example, I mean, when you went through something horrible and you have something beautiful, it's like, by the way, it's like it is good thing to have this. Yes, and in Orthodox, by the way, religion, they also these saint people, they were asking for some troubles so they constantly are turned to God.
Yeah.
And but this, for example, it doesn't work for mature people. Yes, it works like this.
Yes.
But when people are not mature enough, there is a very also interesting thing, challenge. Good times.
Yes.
Because I mean, like Scarlett O'Hara in this.
Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind. With the Wind, yes. When there was this civil war in America, and they were going through all these horrible things, and she belonged to a very rich family, and when she saw what happened after this war, she decided that she will never be hungry again anymore, never.
Yeah.
And she put all her energy to build some material happiness for herself, for her and her family. So I mean that it means that, like Gita says, we have to be whether it is horrible times or good times. It is always changes. We have the challenges. We have to always remember that it is still like a trial, like someone tests you.
Yes.
Just you have to understand how you behave. I mean, in these times, and when you have something bad and when you have something good.
Yes,
this is also because, like I previously said, that when you have something horrible, you don't like this world immediately. I mean, that already. This is like a dream. It's something horrible. When something good starts, no, everything is great already. It's beautiful dream. I want it.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes.
I mean, but it is a big challenge also.
This is a good test. By the way, now we've experienced it a little bit also, fleeing from this fleeing from Ukraine also.
Yeah.
That all this talk and thinking that how spiritual we are and we are doing this and this practice, and you see how lousy you are actually.
The world is a very good mirror to us.
Yeah. So it's a reminder that yes, check it out how spiritual you are at the moment. But also it keeps you alert that you immediately understand that now it's the time to really turn inward, and it's a constant lesson to be learned, and it's a really good thing in this sense. But it also shows that the normal nature, how to react, comes up quite fast. You start hating this, or you don't like this, and you want this, and you're dissatisfied with the common current situation. You want this and that. First, you say these things and think about these things, but afterwards, you see how you again went like that, and then you can turn back inward. Actually, it's a very good teacher in this sense.
And plus, everything changes. I mean, all of a sudden, we have to understand. Really, it is like this. Those who didn't go through this yet, they maybe don't understand this. I mean, that when everything all of a sudden changes, it changes dramatically. For example, I mean that what is the use of the world that can all of a sudden change so dramatically?
Yes.
I mean, it's constantly fleeting. It's nothing is stable.
Nothing.
Rely on anything, just on anything.
When we are all in one way or another looking for security in this world, but nothing is secure. Nothing is secure. It's not. See, this world is. As you say, the world is so fleeting, so changeable. If we look for security outside ourselves, we'll be disappointed. The true security can be found only in our own heart. That alone is the place of refuge for us. And you see, regarding what you were saying, there's a beautiful verse. Well, there are 108 beautiful verses, actually. Like, among the 108 beautiful verses, one of them is Mukilam Mungatum Mukura Mahadane Tukianain Daralarunachala. That means, do not be like a mirror held before a noseless man. Embrace it, wrap me in your grace and uplift me. So the experiences we go through in life are like a mirror. They show us our own defects, our own shortcomings, and particularly intense experiences or experiences that have a tendency to pull our mind outwards with greater vigor. Actually, the mind goes outwards not because of the external things; it's because of our own vasanas. But those experiences that make us makes us inclined to yield to our vasanas and go outwards. Those are like a mirror held before a noseless man. We see our own defects, but that's all the more motivation to turn within.
Exactly.
Because we can be uplifted only by sinking within.
And this is a learning of these teachings, little by little, you learn more, of course. And first, after the first reactions, which is, of course, some counteraction or negativity or anger or whatever, after that goes away, and this fast temper of mine goes away, then I realized that, yes, it was a great teaching, and actually that brought me back to the path and kept me in course. And I'm also always grateful and happy about this realization of it, that it was a great teaching. But somehow it takes many lifetimes, as it seems, to understand immediately that not to go out so quickly. So it takes experience, of course.
And plus,
Bhagavan is a very patient teacher.
Yes.
He gives us time to learn the lesson.
Yeah.
And plus, we always forget that this is also a very important thing. That is why we cannot learn so quickly, because we don't trust Bhagavan in a sense that whatever he does, it is for our good, and that we have to somehow don't keep this luggage on our heads.
Yes.
So, this is also when you want to control. Even when control is even when you react so much to external things. Of course, you react, but at least don't think that you do something. This is you who decide something, who can change something. Because it is great that, for example, it will turn to good. But what is also interesting thing, even though we want world peace in the world, we want these things, but I always remember, and when they, for example, say that we will rebuild Ukraine, it will be again good, and that I want it with all my heart. I just want to stop this absolute madness. But I always remember those who have already died.
Yes.
What kind of world? And what is interesting, we continue talking about world. What world? For whom?
Yes.
For those who are still alive and will live, it's okay. But for those who died, what kind of world? What? What can we give to them?
Yes.
Nothing. They went to such horrible tortures. And what kind of world we can give them?
Yes.
So, I mean that, okay, we will be talking about that we can give this peace and world to some, to children that will survive, that can survive and so on. But what about those who died?
So many children have died, or so many children have been horribly, horribly maimed.
Yes, but idea is, what are we talking at all about?
Yes, exactly.
What everything is lost for them. I mean, in particular sense.
I know. I know exactly what you.
This is what this thing that we take all responsibility on us, that we decide something, that we will build something, for whom we will build something.
Yes, and we will be here forever to enjoy it.
Yes.
We forget how quickly this life passes.
So this is very funny things actually. This is how people are so childish.
Yes.
So, yes, it's interesting. So we have to just understand how that everything is absolutely temporary, everything is absolutely fleeting, and the only thing that we have, the only treasure that we have, it's Bhagavan's teachings, and that's it.
Yes.
It's like this.
And Bhagavan's teachings are a treasure precisely because they're pointing at the one thing that is unchanging, the one thing that is real. That is I am. That is the greatest treasure of all.
Yes.
That is the treasure Bhagavan refers to in another verse of Aksharamala. Teda dutranal tiruvaral nidya tirkum tirtarul arunacha. He refers to arunacha, great treasure of grace found without seeking. That is the great treasure, that awareness that is always shining in our heart as I.
May I also ask a question? Just first a little bit of observation, which Lou and Olena did about the horrible things happening in our world. That very much reminds me words of some Greek philosophers who say that the pain is the beginning of philosophy, because people start thinking about such lofty and high things only after they have experienced some pain or deprivation or such like things. Maybe it's the way it works. And my question is about one a particular verse from Guru Vachaka Kovai, and more specifically about Sadhu Om's commentary. If I may read it, it's not it's one sentence verse. It is verse 267. This in bold script. It says, "This natural self-consciousness of mere existence, without any sense of duality, is the supreme silence, which is glorified as the perfection of jnana, and which cannot be known by the ego, the foolish demon nature." And in particular, I'm interested in this very strong language, where Bhagavan or Muruganar, who wrote that was, I'm not sure, but calling ego the demon nature. And further, Sadhu Om in his commentary writes about just two more short sentences. The eightfold siddhis depend upon the functioning of the ego, which is here said to be a demon nature. These siddhis are therefore demonic powers and not divine powers, as people generally believe. And that these words, this commentary of Sadhu Om is almost word for word what I have read many times in Byzantine church fathers. It's almost just,
Yes.
and whence such language? Were they somehow, was Sadhu Om acquainted with Christian theology? Why did he use that language and that strong language? Because it sounds very like in Orthodox Christianity, they use this very same language about those very same phenomena.
Well, yes. I don't think Sadhu Om knew about Orthodox theology at all, or knew anything about the church fathers. He would have known a little bit about Bible and so on. This word demon, actually, in Bhagavan has used this word. In verse 25 of Uludunapadu, the formless phantom ego, it's usually translated, but that word phantom is pei. Pei means a ghost, phantom, demon, fiend, evil spirit. That is the meaning of the term. So that term, well, I think I've usually usually I translate it as phantom, but sometimes I point out that it's also got that underlying meaning. Phantom doesn't just mean, in this context, doesn't mean just a ghost. It's an evil spirit. This ego is an evil spirit, Bhagavan refers to it. And he, in Aksharammalai, verse 71, he says, Paitanam Vida. He refers to the ego nature as Paitanam, the demon nature. So that my demon nature may leave, you seized me, you caught hold of me as a unleaving demon. He refers to Arunachala as a demon, but obviously there it is metaphorically. Arunachala is the great demon of grace, the demon that will never let go of us. That is, the ego is a small demon. When this big demon comes and takes possession of us, then only will this small demon go away. So he said, seizing me as a great demon, you seizing me, you made me a demoniac, one who is possessed of a demon. There he's referring to the demon of the madness of love for him. So Bhagavan uses very strong language.
And why did Sadhu Om mention siddhis in that commentary? Is it to illustrate or give example of
maybe
of an inflated ego?
What is the verse number?
The number is 267. Guru Vachaka Kovai.
Okay, I'm not quite sure. What is the previous verse? Oh, because he talks there about a killer in the previous verse, a killer Parashakti, the supreme, the almighty power. And what was the previous? It must be to do with the context in which it comes.
My assumption was
because in the previous verse 266 he talks about a killer Parashakti, and in the following verse 268 he talks about a killer Parashakti. So because of the context of power, the siddhis are just false powers. They're just demonic powers. The true power, for example, in 266 he says, the self-consciousness which shines after the destruction of the root thought, the identification with any of the three bodies as I, is the almighty power who resides as I in the hearts of all created beings. And then in this 267, this natural self-consciousness of mere existence without any sense of duality, the supreme silence, which is glorified by scriptures as the perfection of jnana, which cannot be known by ego, the foolish demon nature. So he's connecting this verse with the previous and next verse, though the previous and next verse don't directly talk about siddhis, they're talking about power. What is the real power?
Mm-hmm. And could these siddhis be described or explained as a product of a very much inflated ego?
Yes, yes. Yeah. Bhagavan wrote one verse, I think it's a translation of some verse in Sanskrit, in which he said, the juggler, the stage magician, he deludes the world without deluding himself. But see, my son, the siddha deludes not only the world, he deludes himself. Because the siddhas, those who have acquired siddhis, they think that they have really gained some real powers. But those powers are just an illusion. They're not real at all.
It reminds me of the type of liars who start lying to others and then eventually start believing their own lies.
We've got a classic example in the Kremlin. Someone who has been telling a lie for so long, he's convinced so many people, and now he's convinced himself.
Yes, exactly.
And he's got himself in a hole.
Yes.
So it's the nature. It's the nature of the more we tell a lie, the more we begin to believe what because it's the mind that creates that is. If we can convince ourselves of anything, if we want to.
Mm-hmm.
Even I am this body.
Well, yes, that's the biggest lie of all.
But even, well, this topic subject or theme mentioned by you, so that Bhagavan's path is direct and like straightforward. And it appears to be even more straightforward, more direct than what we may find in traditional, like Western religions like Christianity or Judaism, or maybe in some forms of Hinduism, where a person gets where the most direct experience or manner of getting knowledge is like revelation, like divine revelation, like Moses got from the burning bush, or apostles got from Jesus, or whatever, or in various Hindu stories when someone is talking with Krishna as a body and talking to him like a human. But in case of revelation, there are two agents. Yes, the one who is giving revelation and the other who is receiving revelation. Yes. In case of Bhagavan, it is even a greater shortcut, so to speak.
Yes.
So you don't have this division.
Yes, Bhagavan's path, not only is the practice most direct, but the expression of it is most direct. That is, the teachings are expressed in the most direct manner. What is said in other religions, we find things in Christianity, in Sufism, in different religions, even in different types of different spiritual paths in India. They all seem to be pointing at more or less the same thing, but they're doing so in a very roundabout way, whereas Bhagavan goes straight to the point. What is the point? That the whole thing is, what is real is only ourself. But the problem lies in our in our in our awareness of ourselves as something other than what we actually are. So but we ourselves have a problem, we ourselves have a solution to the problem. So but I don't think it has ever been, not only has Bhagavan shown the direct path so clearly and shown why it's the direct path, but the way he's shown it is in such a direct and simple way.
For normal Christians,
in the more traditional, in the older Advaitic texts, they tend to talk a lot about Brahman. Bhagavan actually doesn't use the term Brahman much. Yes, he does use the term that, referring to Brahman. He does sometimes talk about Brahman. But Bhagavan's focus is on Atma-swarupa, our real nature, on I. Because what is Brahman? Brahman is nothing other than I. Once we've understood that Brahman is nothing other than I, we can dispense with the word Brahman. We don't go around saying Brahman is now talking, Brahman is doing this, Brahman is doing that. We talk about I. I is Bhagavan said, I is the natural name of everyone, including God, including Brahman. So I is the most direct term to use to refer to what is real.
For Christians and normal Western thinking, this is somehow, I always felt like blasphemy, that what do you mean you are God? But on the other hand, if we think that they, on the same time, they say God is everything, God is all, there's nothing but God, but then we must be God also, because
yes.
everything. We can't be excluded from this.
Once a Christian missionary came to Bhagavan and said, is it not blasphemy to say I am God? Bhagavan simply replied, is it not blasphemy to say I'm anything other than God? Because if you say you're something other than God, you're limiting God. You're saying the infinite is not infinite.
Yes.
So the greatest blasphemy is to claim a separate existence. We claim that separate existence. As soon as we rise as ego, we have claimed a separate existence. So the very rising of ego is blasphemy. So we are all guilty of blasphemy.
Yes.
Every moment of our life, we are blaspheming.
Yes.
We cease to blaspheme only when we are swallowed by him.
We are ye with a little faith. That's correct.
Yes, exactly. Faith, what is true faith? Faith is clarity. Our problem is our lack of clarity. Why do we lack clarity? The clarity is always there in our heart, but we're always looking outwards. If we want to increase that clarity, if we want to increase our faith, we have to look within. Faith is not mere belief. It is an inner clarity, but shines in our heart. That inner clarity is what is otherwise called grace. And we can yield ourselves to grace only by turning within.
I somehow believe that this faith in its true sense is also in a way enough, because if we truly believe Bhagavan's words and Bhagavan's teachings and have extreme faith, absolute faith that we are actually, the I is Bhagavan, then actually in this sense, faith is all that is necessary. But like Christ, I just mentioned that ye with little faith, we don't have faith for this Bhagavan's teaching or Bhagavan.
Yes. We don't have faith because we're always looking outside. We're turning our back on the light. How can you have clarity when you're always turning away from the light? If you want to have clarity, you need to turn back within. The clarity is always there in our heart, but we never look back within to see it. And it is from clarity alone that true faith is born.
Exactly.
I used to be told when I was brought up as a Catholic, I used to say, I'm willing to have faith, but I want to have a reason to have faith. I was told, no, faith is a leap in the dark. Now I've come to know from Bhagavan, faith is a leap in the light.
Yes.
Only to the extent to which we turn within towards the light, will true faith blossom in our heart. How can there be faith in darkness? Faith can only be when there's only in clarity. There's everything, only when everything becomes clear is there true faith.
Michael, sorry. Michael, is it enough to do self-investigation? I mean, not to like ancient science and not only this tradition to just, I mean, not think much about what. I mean that only doing this this practice, is it enough to that you naturally start somehow being not that interested in this world, in world and everything this which is out? I mean, is it because I mean that all yogis, for example, they lead these ascetic lives and so on. I mean, maybe somehow I just think that this practice, maybe it is just absolutely enough to it. I mean, there is a natural process of purification.
Yes.
I mean, very, very, very strong, very powerful process.
Yes.
I mean, that you even don't need anything else, maybe.
What is required is not just to lose interest in other things. We need to have all-consuming interest to know and to be what we actually are. To the extent to which we have interest to know ourselves, our interest in other things will drop off. But if we merely give up interest in other things, we end up in Laya. That is why Bhagavan's path is a very positive path. Bhagavan didn't ask us to give up thoughts. He asked us to hold on to I. To the extent to which we hold on to I, we are thereby turning our back on thoughts. Thoughts cannot exist without us attending to them. So we automatically solve the problem with thoughts by holding on to I. Whereas if we're trying to get rid of thoughts, our attention is on the thoughts. So rather than putting things negatively, but we have to lose interest in any other things, let's put it positively. We have to gain all-consuming interest to know and to be ourselves. The interest in other things will automatically drop off without our even noticing it.
How to go west, leave the east.
Yes.
Yaroslav wanted to say.
Yes.
I wanted just to comment on those Christian missionaries who thought that that would be a blasphemy, but maybe those were some exotic Protestant ones or not very educated, because in Christianity, in Orthodox and in Catholic, and I'm sure in Lutheran and Anglican, they all honor and recognize Saint Athanasius from Alexandria, who told that the Son of God became man so that we become God. So,
yes.
And there is saying in among Orthodox fathers that God became man so that man becomes God, divinized. Or there is also theosis, and there might be some bridge between Christianity and Hinduism in these teachings, but that is not a great focus, I would say, because people are mostly focused on rituals, on belonging to some church, on just expressing their feelings about Jesus externally, and you don't know what is inside those people.
Yes,
and
it's
taking
the same
communion.
in all religions. Most people's minds are outward going.
Yes,
Jesus himself, I think, I'm not very. I can't remember the Bible so well, but I think when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he was praying to God, he prayed that they may be one in me as I am one in you, something to that effect. So he was praying, but we should be one with him. So it is there, but people interpret things in their own way. If people don't see what they don't want to see.
Yes. And even the attention, even in everyday life, people's attention is like, I noticed it, for example, when I worked at a company where there were many people, and some say when we looked at some photograph or whatever, and you notice that different people notice different things according to their inclinations.
Yes.
And even a very great discovery to me was, I don't know, but I noticed that, for example, men and women notice often very different things and pay attention to different things. What a man would overlook and never ever notice, a woman will always notice, and vice versa.
Exactly.
What a woman may overlook, a man will notice that in the first place.
Yes.
And even on individual level, just even humor, kind of jokes. You say one kind of joke, one type of people reacts to that. Another kind of joke, another people react to that. So it's like something we want to see. Maybe
that's why there will always be so many different views. See politics. You had some people are more left-wing, some people are more right-wing. Each believes that their view is correct, but what they do, all believe, but that is, some politicians may be in politics just for what they can get out of it. But a lot of, even among politicians, there are a lot of sincere people on both sides of the argument. They are just seeing things from a different perspective. It's the same in philosophy. There's so many different philosophical views. Each one is seeing from their own view. Same in religion, same in everything. We are all seeing the world through our own colored glasses. But if we want to see the truth, we need to stop looking through the mind. We need to look back within to the heart. There is only one view. So long as we look outwards, there are so many different views.
In this Easter time, I was trying to watch some religious church ceremony, and I just talked with Olena about it. That I watched for a half an hour or so, and what the priest was saying from the Bible, the words were correct, but you can somehow see and sense that they don't understand what they're saying at all. Maybe it's because of the tradition that you shouldn't even try to understand. You just believe in these words. But if there's words like, for instance, it wasn't there, I think, but if said like Christ said that I and Father are one. It's repeated or something like this, but there's no idea that you have to understand what it means. It's just like this 2,000 years ago, this one person said something, but it's like neglecting the gems of these great words and teachings, which we have had for thousands of years, and we haven't ever really gone deep what they might mean.
They're not neglecting, they're just not seeing.
Maybe.
So it's it is only grace that gives us to see these things, to recognize the deeper meaning in these things.
And I have to say, without Bhagavan's teaching,
no, we wouldn't understand at all.
I couldn't see anything about any little things. It's like having glasses for the first time in your life. Teaching Bhagavan's teachings, you can, with those glasses, you can understand all these religions. Better.
And we can understand how everything has its place. All these different beliefs, they're all appropriate for people at certain stages of spiritual development.
Definitely. Michael,
ultimately, the truth is beyond all words.
Yes, that's true. Michael, what do you think about this fourth? Not really a question, but well, maybe it is a question that I sent you. What do you think? Do you want to talk anything about this?
Okay, I'll just talk briefly. That is. The question is, Sadhu Om and your translations project and the main scriptures you worked on. How did this process begin and what was it like? well, it would be a long story, but after I was fortunate when I first came to Tiruvannamalai, I had heard a little bit about Bhagavan, but I knew very little about him. But someone had given me when I was in Sri Lanka, someone had showed me Arthur Osborne's biography of Bhagavan, Ramana Maharshi and the Path of Self-Knowledge. And what I read in that, what that person suggested I read was about Bhagavan's death experience. So I read that. That kindled my curiosity. So I wanted to come, but I knew very little about Bhagavan, as I say. The first thing I read when I came was a translation of Who Am I? I can't say I understood it very deeply, but as soon as I read it, I knew, this is what I've been looking for. But previously, I had been looking for something, but not really knowing what I was looking for. I'd gone to Vipassana meditation course, and I'd gone to so many ashrams and different holy places in the Himalayas. I knew I was looking, and I was reading so many different books. I knew I was looking for something, but I didn't really know what I was looking for until I read Who Am I? Then that was so clear to me, this is it. So then I decided that, yes, I want to stay here. But the main thing for me then was how to put this into practice. When I read many of the books that were available in those days, nobody seemed to clearly explain what is the practice. Arthur Osborne says, meditate on the heart on 2 digits to right from the center of chest. That never seemed to me to be correct. It just didn't make sense to me. Then there was, shortly after I came, I made friends with a young Malaysian who was also staying in the ashram. He told me, but he had this book, Path of Sri Ramana, but he had been lent by Sadhu Om, and who was the author of the book. And he said, it's a very nice book. So I was interested. I said, does it explain about the practice? He said, yes, it explains very nicely. So I said, I want to read that. And he said, okay, I will ask whether I can lend it to you after I finish reading it. And then one day he said to me, I'm going to meet Sadhu Om. Would you like to come? I said, oh, yes. So I accompanied him. And when I met Sadhu Om, I found actually I'd already met him. I met him a few days before, one morning when I was going around the hill, but I didn't know who he was at the time. So then soon after that, I read Path of Sri Ramana, and what struck me most of all is the word self-attention. That made sense of everything. This is what the practice is. We have to attend to ourselves. So whenever I had any questions, I would come to Sadhu Om, but I was a bit shy. So I didn't like to come without any questions. So I sometimes used to try to think of a question just to come and talk to him, because whenever I came here, so many very useful, very precious gems were falling from his mouth, so to speak. Then I came to know that he was writing a Tamil prose rendering of Guru Vacha Kovai. And I knew that was being serialized, a translation by Professor Swaminathan was being serialized in the Mountain Path. So I started reading through all the back issues of Mountain Path, all the translations by Professor Swaminathan. And whenever it wasn't clear, I would then go and ask Sadhu Om, because I thought this is a very good opportunity to go and question him. So any verse that wasn't entirely clear to me, I would go and ask him. Then one day he said to me, often when I asked him, he said, it doesn't quite mean that. He told me what the correct meaning is. Then one day he of his own accord suggested, why don't we start making our own translation? This is after I'd known him for a few months. From that time onwards, we started translating Guru Vacha Kovai. So the first work we translated was Guru Vacha Kovai, which took many years. I can't remember how many years it took us to complete, because he always had a lot of work. He was editing Murugan's works, and there was a constant flow of visitors and everything. But eventually we translated the whole of Guru Vacha Kovai, at least a rough translation. And in the meanwhile, I'd asked him about other works, and when I read translations of Uludunapadu, I wasn't very satisfied with that. I'd asked him, and he'd shown me his translations. Then when I questioned him more, he said, oh, we can improve this. So I think he and we went through all of Bhagavan's works, all of Bhagavan's original writings, we translated in bits and pieces. Sometimes it was just a matter of improving on a translation which he'd done earlier with other people, because his knowledge of English was fairly limited. He could express himself well in English, in spite of speaking very ungrammatically and writing very ungrammatically, because he had natural power of expressing himself. But when it comes to translating, you need to translate precisely, and so he would make a rough translation in English. I would then read it, see if I can polish it. I'd question him about it, and in that way we improved the translations. But many of the translations we did, I have since, by going deeper into the subject, I've found better ways of expressing them in English. And once my understanding of Tamil has been deepening, as I've been understanding Tamil more clearly, I've found better ways of expressing it in English. So my translations, even now I'm still improving my translations, but I went through all the important works of Bhagavan with Sadhu Om. The important works are basically Arunacha Stuti Panchakam. That's the 5 hymns to Arunachala. The main 5 hymns are Arunacha Akshara Malai. That's 108 verses. That is Akshara Manamalai. Akshara has 2 meanings. Akshara means imperishable. It also means a letter of the alphabet. But because Indian alphabets are syllabic alphabets, that is, there's a separate character for each syllable. So for example, there's K is 1 letter, Ka is another letter, K long A is another letter, K short Ki is another short letter. So like that, they're alphabets made out of syllables. So basically, Akshara means a syllable. Mana means marriage or union, and Malay means a garland. So it is a garland it's a marriage garland of letters, because in Indian marriage ceremony, one of the key parts of the ceremony is when the bride and bridegroom exchange garlands. So Bhagavan made this garland of verses as his to adorn Arunachala, and pray to Arunachala to adorn with the garland of his grace. So it's a bridal garland. That is, it is what in Christianity would be called bridal mysticism. That is, he's praying for the divine marriage. So the Akshara, it's called Akshara because each verse begins, it's in alphabetical order. So each verse starts with a new syllable going through the whole alphabet. And Akshara also means imperishable. So it also means the garland of imperishable union, because the marriage Bhagavan is praying for is not a bodily marriage, it's a spiritual marriage, an eternal and imperishable marriage. So those are very short verses, but extremely deep in meaning. Many of the verses can be interpreted in a number of different ways, but all the interpretations are so rich and deep in meaning. So that arguably is it's either the most important or one of the most important works of Bhagavan, because whereas in other works, Bhagavan is telling us what needs to be done. In Aksharam, like he's showing us the actual path. That is, when you follow this, when we try to turn our attention within, we come across so many obstacles in the form of our own vasanas. So Aksharam is showing us, is, so to speak, it's taking us by the hand and leading us along the path. And it's, as Bhagavan said, bhakti is the mother of jnana. Love is the mother of knowledge. So without all-consuming love, we cannot even begin on, well, it's love that begins us on this path, and we cannot succeed in this path until our love becomes all-consuming. Because we have this path of the Bhagavan has taught us, the path of self-investigation and self-surrender. That is, we cannot investigate and know what we actually are without surrendering ourselves completely, without giving ourselves entirely. So it requires supreme love. So Akshram Lai is all about that the love that is required to follow this path. So that is such a precious work, very, very deep and highly significant work. I've started to explain those verses. I've always felt in trepidation to do so, because I feel like, can I really do justice to it? Because it's such a deep work. But anyway, fools rush where angels fear to tread. So being the fool I am, I'm rushing into it, doing my best to explain it. And I'm also, I'm explaining it in a series of meetings with the local group here in London, but I'm also writing articles on each verse as before doing so. So, because that makes me think more deeply about it. Then the other 4 hymns are Arunachal and Nabamanimalai, which is a collection of 9 verses that he composed at different times. The first 2-3 verses are about, first 3 verses are all verses praising the greatness of Arunachal's grace. Verses 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all heart-melting prayers. And 8 and 9 are semi-autobiographical verses. As I say, these are verses he composed at different times in different contexts. Then comes another really important work, Arunachala Patikam. These verses are verses that came to Bhagavan spontaneously. That is, the opening words of the first verse, those words kept on coming to his mind. Karanayalene, Karanayalene. That means by grace me, by grace me. These words kept on coming to his mind. And he thought, what have these words got to do with me? He was brushing them aside. But eventually, he wrote down one of the verses. And the first verse. And the next day, a verse beginning with the last word of the previous verse started coming to his, I think the first verse ends with Ambe, means oh love. And the second verse begins Amburu Varunachala, Arunachala, the form of love. Let me see. Yes, that's the second verse. So like that, each verse begins with the previous, with the concluding word of the previous verse. So like this, for a number of days, for 17 days, a verse was coming to him each day, and he wrote it down. Then a devotee was about to print some other verses he had written. And when he came to know about this, he said, oh, can I print these also? Then Bhagavan looked at it. He saw the first 11 were in 1 meter. They were, there was a particular type of viratum with 7 metrical feet in each line. So he took those 11 and called them Arunachala Patikam, which means 10 verses, but traditionally a group of 10 verses will always have an 11th verse. And then the other 6 verses, they were in an 8-seer viratum, an 8-foot viratum. So usually often songs have 8 verses. So Bhagavan composed the final 2 verses to make it into an ashtakam. That's how Arunachala Patikam and ashtakam came into being. Those are very, very beautiful and deep verses, full of bhakti and jnana. That is a lot of Bhagavan has given many of the deepest teachings in Uladu Napadu we can find particularly in Arunachala Ashtakam. He explains there how, but there's only, in verse 6, for example, he says, Undoru porul ari voliulameni. There is only one thing, one substance. You, the the heart, the light of awareness. You means he's addressing Arunachal. So you means Arunachal. What is Arunachal? Arunachal is the heart, the light of awareness. So what is shining within us as I, that is Arunachala. Then he goes on to explain how in you, but not other than you, there is a wonderful power. That is the Maya or mind. From that, he explains how the world is created. The world is nothing but he uses there the cinema analogy. Bhagavan was very topical because these verses he composed, I think, about 1912. So cinemas were hardly, particularly in South India, people had heard of cinemas, but they were hardly have become popular by that time. In an earlier verse, he used an analogy of a photographic plate. Once a photographic plate is exposed to the sun, it cannot take any other image. Likewise, when the mind is exposed to the sun of pure awareness, it will no longer be able to grasp any image. So he uses very, what were in those days very modern and scientific or technological, the cutting edge technology of the day, he used as analogies. So in verse 6, he explains how the world comes into existence, and it's nothing but thoughts. It's just like a picture being projected on a screen. It's the world is projected on the screen of the mind. And he said the world inside and outside, because in our experience, there seem to be two worlds. There's the external world of material objects, and there's the internal world of our thoughts and feelings and everything. All is just a projection, according to Bhagavan. And finally, in that verse, he ends by saying, Nindrida Sendrida Ninevida Vindre. Let them appear or not appear. They are not other than you. In other words, he's indicating there, we should be unconcerned about the appearance. Let anything appear or not appear. It's not other than you. And what is you? You means Arunachala, who he said in the first verse is the light of awareness, the heart. So he's what is always shining, the awareness I am, which is always shining in our heart. That alone is Arunachala. That alone is what is real. So let us not be concerned about this appearance. We should be concerned only about what is real, namely I am. That is the implication there. And then in the next verse, he goes on to say, he begins by saying, Indraha meno neni piravondrum, that if Indraham Indru aham enum nenevu enil. If a thought called I does not exist, the thought called I means ego, if it does not exist, pira ondrum indru, nothing else exists. And then he goes on to describe the practice of self-investigation. Until then, if any other thought appears, to whom? To me, who am I? He's giving the core practice. Whatever may appear, to whom does it appear? To me, who am I? That's why he said in the previous verse, let it appear or let it not appear. It's not other than you. But the practical implication of that is, whatever may appear, to whom does it appear? We should turn our attention back within. And thereby, we merge back into the heart and we become the emperor under the shade of a single umbrella. In other words, we become the supreme lord of the universe. And then he says, then the dream of duality, the dream of pairs of opposites, of inside and outside, of good karma and bad karma, all these dualities, it's all just a dream, and this dream will no longer exist. What will exist is only you. How does he end it? Mandraham Achalaman Nadamidum Aruna Malayanum Eleyarum Aruloli Kadale. Only you, the light of grace, only you, the ocean which is the ocean of the light of grace, the Eleyarum, without any limit, the limitless, the ocean, the limitless ocean of the light of grace. The light of grace means the light of awareness. Called Arana Malay, called the Arana Hill, who are dancing in the Nadamido, actually, who are dancing motionlessly in the court of the heart. So Bhagavan's verses, all the verses in Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, they are full of bhakti and jnana, so beautifully blended together. And then finally, there's another, the final hymn is called Arunachal Pancharatnam. That's 5 verses. Again, there's a lot of jnana teachings there. He says in the second verse that Arunachal is always dancing in the heart as I, therefore his name is heart. And then he gives the practice beautifully in the third verse. Ahamukama andam amalamati tannal. Ahamidutan engiruman drying. It's a beautiful verse. I just give one sample verse because ahamukama. Ahamukam means facing inwards. Ahamukama under amalamati tannal. By that blemishless mind, which is turning inwards, aham idutan, where does this I rise? Investigating where does this I rise? Ahavaruve, knowing clearly the nature of I, by investigating where this I rises, knowing that, one will merge in you in you Arunachala like a river in the ocean. So he clearly explains the practice there again. So for Bhagavan, Atma-vichara, self-investigation and self-surrender are inseparable. So these are the 5 hymns to Arunachala. Then there are the works which are the Upadesha works. These are called Upadesha Numalai. Upadesha means the teachings. Though, of course, there's so many teachings there in Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, the Upadesha Numalai are the collection of verses that are particularly giving Upadesha. That is Upadesha Undiya, the 30 verses. Then that's Upadesha Undiya and Uludunapadu are 2 of the most important works. So Upadesha Undiya, then Uludunapadu. Uludunapadu is the 40 verses on what is. That gives Bhagavan gives his teachings there in its very, very purest and deepest he gives the deepest and purest expression to his core teachings in Uludunapadu. That's the most important work. Well, I say that of everyone because each is important in its own way, but Uludunapadu is I don't think there's any jnana sastra in the world that can compare with Uludunapadu. It is such a deep work. Then there's Uludunapadu Anubandham, which is a collection of again, another 40 verses. But they're verses that Bhagavan wrote at different times. So many of them are translations from other texts. So there are many nice teachings there, but of course it's nothing to compare with Uludunapadu in its depth and in its very systematic treatment of the subject. Then there's Ekama Panchakam. That was the last work Bhagavan wrote. That's 5 verses. Then Apalapatu, that's a song he composed for his mother, again full of jnana teachings. And one of the most beautiful of all, Atma-Vidya, that is the 5 verses it's a kirtanam. So it's got a refrain, a sub-refrain, and 5 verses. The refrain and sub-refrain were composed by Murugan, and the verses are explaining the refrain and sub-refrain. The refrain is Aye ati sulapum. That is, so easy. Atma-Vidya, so easy. So that song is explaining why this is the easiest of all paths. So that's a very, very important and beautiful, beautiful work, very deep in meaning. So those are the main works in Upadesha Numalai. Sadhu Om also collected together 25 stray verses, and he edited them together into a work called Upadesha Tanipaka. That means miscellaneous verses of Upadesha. Again, like Uludunapdu and Bandam, that's a mixture of verses that Bhagavan translated and his own original verses. That's 27 verses. So those are the main Bhagavan's original verse compositions. And then the other most important work is Nana, Who Am I? That is really the that's the most important of all the prose works. Others were translated or just what Bhagavan wrote as introductions, but I mean nothing compares with Nana. It's such an important work. Bhagavan gives all the basic principles of his teaching and explains the practice so clearly. So that is that ranks along with Upadesha Undiyar and Uludunapdu as one of the 3 core texts of Bhagavan's teachings. If we study and understand these 3 texts, Upadesha Undiyar, Uludunapdu, and Nana, we will understand all the basic principles of his teachings.
By the way, started translating, as I wrote to you some time ago, that I took this challenge to translate these three major works in Finnish.
Yes.
I did this Uludunapdu, I already did roughly, though
yes.
It's not finished. But I doubt that
I haven't finished my translation yet.
Yeah, I think I never.
It will always be a rough translation.
But anyway, I took this as a good practice.
Yes,
also.
it is.
But I think, as I heard from some publishers say that it's not a bestseller. So
I don't think it will. I don't think it will ever be a bestseller.
But it's very nice to continue and just get more deeply involved. Yeah. That's the main idea. Yeah. Great. Democracy
is very good for running this society, but democracy doesn't apply to spirituality.
No.
But we cannot decide the truth on how many votes it gets.
Yes, that's true.
The deeper something is, the less popular it will be. Yeah, because at any time, there'll be relatively few people who really want to go deep into any subject. Particularly the spiritual subject.
Yes.
But at least you can, when you have democracy, at least you can, for example, publish this book on your own account. For example.
Yes. Yeah. Democracy is very good. There are many benefits in democracy.
Definitely, because
and also we have freedom of belief in democracy, yes, which you don't have in many societies in the world.
It's very important because, for example, my teachers, I call him the very first spiritual man that I met. I mean, he was the first president of Krishna Society in Ukraine, in Kyiv.
Yes.
And he was, just imagine, he was imprisoned and put in lunatic asylum for his beliefs. It was before Soviet Union collapsed. So I mean that just because of his activity, I mean, this activity was quite limited.
Yes.
Anyway, so but this is how it is. So it's better to have democracy, I have to say.
I think yes. Democracy is never perfect, but it's better than any other system that we could ever come up with.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in China, so
yes.
yeah, so you know, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you can understand easily.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm.
Well, that's quite a remarkable. There's no words to express. Of course, it's like amazing this whole work that you did with Sadhu Om and the whole thing. It's unbelievable.
Well, what is most unbelievable is that Bhagavan should choose such a worthless person to do all these things.
I think he chose quite well. I trust him.
People used to bring Bhagavan costly pens, Schaefer pens or Parker pens.
Oh, yeah.
And whenever he was offered some very costly pen, he would say, "Oh, take it to the office. They've got so many important things to write there." And people say, no, Bhagavan, you've got important things to write. You write Uludunapadu and this and that, and you copy so many things for people. So better you have a better pen. He said, no, my old leaky pen. This does its purpose. So Bhagavan chooses very, very substandard instruments to do his work.
Oh, I have to say,
Some things that are useless would be useless in anyone else's hands. Anyone else would complain, "Oh, this pen is old, leaky, it doesn't write properly, it doesn't write smoothly." Nobody else would have been satisfied with that. Bhagavan was satisfied with it. So Bhagavan will choose even the most worthless instruments. In his previous avatara as Rama, when he was fighting some demon, he took a small blade of grass and said some mantra, used it as a Brahmastra. Brahmastra means the supremely powerful weapon. So he can use even the most worthless thing to do his work if he wants to.
I think he chose right, of course. Can't disagree. Well, it's been around 3 hours.
Yes.
I don't know if there's any questions. I don't know. We don't, I think, have, but if somebody has questions, please ask, of course.
Michael, I think I want to say something strange, but I think that this interesting thing that such people, I mean, very humble, like Bhagavan, I mean, that they were not the thing is that the very fact that they didn't like to waste anything.
Yes.
It is from, I mean, these people are somehow absolutely completed human beings because they were very loving in everything. When you don't waste, you just save something.
Yes.
Immediately you save something. They were saving always something. It was both souls and material.
Yes. It is said, people saw Bhagavan, if he spots on the ground a grain of rice or even a mustard seed, he will pick it up, he will take it to the kitchen and he will put it in the appropriate tin or container. So not even a mustard seed or a grain of rice he will waste.
From my point of view, it is such a great capacity.
Yes. How different to our modern day society where we waste so much.
Waste so much. It somehow it is immediately. It's like indicating of something is wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
And all the products are just for short use. Like
they make the products for short use.
Yeah, because I remember like washing machines, they were for decades and decades. Nowadays it's only a year or two and they're don't use them anymore. And like everything else, it's just then they recycle, of course, nowadays. But still, don't make it properly anymore. It's like the light bulb. Actually, they can last for 100 years.
Yes.
Normally. Yes. Well, if there isn't any questions, in that case, I just of course thank you, Michael. It was absolutely
all
wonderful.
thanks to Bhagavan. All
Michael,
thanks to
for your time.
Bhagavan.
Yeah, but it was very, very.
For your
The top,
time.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, thank you, Juicy. Yeah, yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank all of you.
Participating. Thank you. And
Thank you.
I think it was wonderful.
It's good to size. Yeah.
all the best Love, for you, and I
Mhm.
wish all the best.
Yeah.
And let's hope the light will be bright over there also. And the topics were, after all, I think they were quite nice, because they had this full circle and
Yeah.
some extra in the end with these
Yes.
writing teachings and these
Yes.
work. So thank you very much, Michael, once again.
Okay. Thank
For
you.
your healing, that
Yeah.
you are healing us.
Yes,
Bhagavan is the doctor. He's doing all the healing.
absolutely.
I'm just a fellow patient in the hospital. I'm in ICU.
You are this chief nurse. Michael.
Yes.
No, I'm cheap. I'm one of the most critically ill patients.
This intensive care unit here, but anyway.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all. and
Okay,
see
right,
later,
thank
and
you.
all the best.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.